Car Sharks, screenplay by Wayne T. Chapman and Mason Nocaliello. 99 Castings, 786-249-7910. Carshark1965 at gmail.com, 954-773-5687. Fade in. Interior men's bathroom, day. The door of a large white-tiled bathroom swings open. Thomas Wayne, early 40s, adorned in a customary salesperson's white dress shirt and colorful tie, enters the bathroom with a purpose to his step. Thomas passes a few urinals and spots his own reflection in the wall-length mirror that's positioned at chest level. Thomas says to himself, "Come on, man, you got this." Thomas chooses a stall, unzips, arches his back, then begins to relieve himself. Just one more deal. The flushing of a toilet from the stalls on the other side of the bathroom catches Thomas's attention. Seconds later, one of the stall doors flies open and Big Bob Elizondo, mid-50s, saunters his extra-large frame through the stall door. Big Bob heads to the nearby sinks and says, "Thought I heard something." Thomas playfully rolls his eyes as Big Bob continues, "You choked that little chicken of yours, Tommy boy. Don't have a chat with it." Thomas chuckles as he walks over to wash his hands. Thomas says, "Gotta put this deal to bed or I'm dead." Thomas begins to wash his hands and continues, "Now don't get me wrong, the Vances are in love with the new Quest." Big Bob chuckles and says, "Credit bandits, right?" Thomas shrugs his shoulders and answers, "About to find out. Gary's running the bureau right now." Big Bob commiserates and says, "My last customers, they couldn't even finance a friggin' cup of cappuccino." Thomas shakes his head as they head to the bathroom's exit. Big Bob continues, "Sorry to say, Tommy, but 4 bits of my wife's left tit, we ain't seeing shit for the rest of the month." Thomas says, "Hey, thanks for the pep talk." Thomas stops, adjusts his tie in the mirror, then smiles. But it's showtime! Exterior, Interstate Highway, afternoon. The view is 25 feet above a busy interstate highway, cruising southward above the traffic. In the distance, a large 30-foot-high block white lighter sign on the side of a highway overpass slowly comes into view. The sign reads, "Welcome to Daytona Beach." The view flies over that same overpass that reveals the sprawling acreage of the Daytona Beach Auto Mall. A narrator in a voiceover says the Daytona Beach Auto Mall is a world-class, state-of-the-art sales and service mecca. The view drops to 10 feet above the road and passes the Auto Mall's welcome sign. The narrator continues in a voiceover. "It's been described as the answer to a car shopper's wildest dream." The view flies down the entrance road to the Nissan dealership. The view slows as it approaches a young couple who are noticeably arguing with a Nissan salesperson. The young woman of the couple flips the salesperson her middle finger. The view travels up to the Nissan dealership's glass front doors. The doors swing open and the view enters the showroom. Interior, Nissan showroom floor, afternoon. The view spots Thomas, who has just exited the same bathroom from moments earlier, then crosses the showroom floor to meet him. The narrator in the voiceover continues, "But how this dealership has become this salesman's worst nightmare." Thomas heads to a nearby negotiating table to greet an elderly couple. The narrator concludes in a voiceover, "Now that's the tragedy to this comedy." Thomas gives them a thumbs up as he passes the table, then darts to a large wooden door that has Sales Tower emboldened upon it near the front of the showroom. Thomas takes a deep breath and enters the Sales Tower. Interior, Nissan Sales Tower, afternoon. Thomas enters the Sales Tower, a long, narrow room divided in two, a raised desk area for management and a lower bullpen area for the salespeople. Thomas waves to his salty sales manager, Gary Kendallson, late 50s, who is seated behind the raised desk. A manila folder comes out of nowhere and smacks Thomas in the forehead. A startled Thomas watches the 10 or so documents that were housed by the manila folder cascade to the bullpen floor. Gary calls out, You gotta be shitting me with these jokers, T-Bone. Thomas scrambles to pick up the strewn paperwork as his finance director, Kenny Wingate, early 60s, appears from behind Gary. Kenny says, "Oh shit, sorry, Tommy." Kenny looks over Gary's shoulder, then spots Norbert/Rose Vance's credit report blinking red on Gary's computer. Kenny says, "Seriously, the Vances are cockroaches, Thomas." Thomas says, "Mrs. Vance is gonna flip." Gary points to the sales tower door and yells out, "Sharp! Next!" Thomas dejectedly exits the room to convey the bad news. Exterior, front of the Nissan dealership, afternoon. A few salespeople are walking around as the front doors of the dealership fly open. An extremely agitated Mrs. Vance emerges from the showroom, then storms towards the customer parking area. She angrily turns and spots Thomas and Mr. Vance trailing behind her. Mrs. Vance yells out, "I told you not to co-sign for that good-for-nothing sister of yours." Mrs. Vance waits for her husband to reach her, then she snatches the set of keys he's holding. Mr. Vance says, "Come on now, I just thought..." Mrs. Vance interrupts. She says, "You thought? Kristen goes and gets her Honda repoed, and now I can't get my new van." Mrs. Vance grabs Mr. Vance by the arm, then proceeds to scold him the whole way back to their old van. Thomas sarcastically waves to them. Thomas yells out, "Hey, thanks, Tommy, for the last 2 hours of pointless help. You're the greatest." Thomas shakes his head, then laughs at his own misfortune. Thomas watches the Vance's van drive away, then he turns to the showroom. Thomas is surprisingly greeted by Remington Pearson, a tall, thin, early 20s Haitian man. The young man reaches out to shake Thomas's hand. He says, "Hi, I'm Remington Pearson. It's Mr. Wayne, right?" Remington giggles a little as they share the handshake. Remington answers, "Mr. Thomas Wayne, I presume?" Thomas instantly recognizes Remy as a comic book nerd and puts his arm around the young man's shoulder. Thomas says, "Yes, and just like my namesake, father of Batman, Thomas Wayne will teach you all the ways of the car sharks." Remington is startled by Thomas's familiarity, so Thomas smiles reassuringly, then releases his grip. Thomas says, Gary told us you'd be shadowing for some pointers." Thomas begins to walk back to the showroom as Remington then follows in tow. Remington asks, "So what happened, Mr. Wayne? The customers love that new van." They reach the front doors, and Thomas yanks the heavy door open for Remington to enter. Thomas says, "You gotta be extra careful with your credit, kid. Never know when it's gonna bite you in the ass." Thomas jokingly pinches his own butt, then jumps as he enters the dealership. Interior, Nissan showroom floor, afternoon. Thomas and Remington enter the dealership, then Thomas scans the nearly empty showroom floor. Thomas says, "Nothing going on here. Let's go find the guys." Thomas spots an attractive woman exiting the sales tower. As she walks the short distance from the tower door over to the receptionist's desk, Thomas waves to her. Thomas urges Remington to follow as the woman waves back. Thomas says, "Come on, wants you to meet the lady that keeps this place humming." The guys complete the short walk over to the receptionist's desk as Thomas calls out, "Lyric, what's up?" Thomas shares a special fist pump with Lyric Porter, mid-20s, as she then pats Thomas on the back. Lyric says, "Tough break with advances, Thomas." Thomas shrugs his shoulders and says, "Hey, luck of the up, doll." And obviously smitten Remington nudges Thomas and says, "Hey, what's luck of the up?" Just as Thomas begins to explain to Remington, Lyric puts her hand in front of Thomas's mouth to quell him. Lyric attempts her best Forrest Gump impersonation to answer. Lyric says to Remington, "An up is a new customer, and a customer's credit is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get." Lyric and Thomas again share their special fist pump. Remington widens his eyes to Thomas, still looking for that introduction. Thomas finally gets the hint. Thomas says to Lyric, "Oh, shit, where's my manners? Miss Lyric Porter, may I introduce Master Remington Pearson?" Remington coyly smiles as Lyric reaches out, then daintily shakes his hand. Remington says, "The pleasure's all mine, and my friends call me Remy." Lyric answers, "Well then, Remy it is." Thomas scans the nearly empty showroom floor as Lyric flips through an appointment book that's laying upon her desk. Lyric says, "I don't know what's going on, Tommy. We don't have anything on the books till next month." Thomas answers, "Talk about Deadsville, USA." Thomas checks his phone for any messages and responds, "Hey, where's the boys at, doll?" Lyric points towards the back of the showroom and answers, "Think I saw Nikki talking on the phone. Back in service." Thomas winks at Lyric as he and Remy follow her directions. Thomas says, "Thanks, babe. Catch you." The guys start their trek towards the service area as Remy turns back just for one glance of Lyric. Lyric and Remy's eyes meet as she bites her bottom lip. Remy's legs buckle temporarily as he then attempts to catch up with Thomas's pace. Interior Nissan showroom/service area, afternoon. Remington catches up with Thomas as he heads towards the rear of the main showroom, nearing the interior entrance to the service area of the dealership. Remy asks, "Mr. Wayne?" Thomas answers, "Hey, Remy, enough of that Mr. Wayne jazz, would you? You make me feel like I'm 100. Thomas turns to Remy and answers, "My friends call me Tommy." Remington smiles with a newfound confidence and says, "Thanks, Mr. Tommy." Thomas scans the service area to see if anyone's afoot, then they enter the room. Interior Nissan service area, afternoon. Thomas and Remington casually stride into the service area's main lobby. Thomas waves to a woman who has just entered the service area through the large glass doors on the opposite side of the room. Remington nearly salivates as the woman, Janelle Pierto, late 20s, and fiercely attractive, slowly approaches. Thomas steps towards Janelle to greet her. Thomas says, "What's good, gorgeous?" Janelle answers, "Hey, how's the hammer hanging, Tommy?" Janelle quickly turns her attention to Remington and says, "And this must be Remington Steele." Janelle scans him head to toe as Remington nervously smiles. Janelle says, "Oh, kid, you just gotta use. I'm brand new in the business for the next couple of years. You'll slay him with that shit." Thomas scans the empty service area and says, "Hey, you catch anyone out in service lane, Janny?" Janelle sarcastically laughs and answers, "Saw a couple tumbleweeds tumbling through. Hey, what the hell happened to the traffic, Tommy?" Thomas shrugs his shoulders and says, "We hit 400 deals on the 20th, then poof." Thomas makes a dramatic hand gesture and continues, "Like Big Bob ripping a fart in the wind, traffic lingered for a bit, then disappeared." Big Bob walks up to greet the group from the showroom floor as Janelle laughs and says, "Then it drifted right back in." Thomas and Janelle laugh as they welcome Big Bob. They all head to a nearby table that has 10 or so chairs ringing its circumference. Interior Nissan service area's TV waiting room, afternoon. Two salesmen are seated and watching a television program on an overhead monitor. One of the salesmen, Logan Jeffries, handsome, dark-skinned, late 20s, turns his head and takes notice of Thomas's group taking their seats at the large table. Logan stands, then urges the second salesman, Murray McCoy, fair-skinned, late 40s, to follow him. Logan says, "Mac, there's Tommy and his crew." Murray looks over at the group of salespeople and spots Big Bob taking a seat at the table. Murray answers, no." Murray points at Big Bob and says, "Don't need to deal with Elizondo today." Considerably larger in stature, Logan lovingly grabs Murray by the collar and says, "Deal with it. Want to see what's up with the lack of traffic." Murray obliges the tugging, then they head towards the group. Interior Nissan service area's main lobby, afternoon. Logan and Murray approach the group. Logan eyes Janelle chatting with Thomas. Logan says, "Nelly, mi amor, what's kicking?" Thomas winks at Logan as Janelle blows Logan a kiss. Janelle says, "Mamma mia, it's a man!" The crew all crack up as Murray then intentionally brushes up against the back of Big Bob's chair on his way past him. Big Bob says sarcastically to Big Bob, "Oh, excuse me." Thomas catches Murray sliding, then taps Big Bob on the shoulder to ease his seething. Thomas says to Big Bob, "Hey, go easy, brother. It's not worth it." Murray and Logan take their seats on the opposite side of the table from Thomas and Janelle. Logan says, "Thomas, this the newbie?" Thomas taps Remy on the shoulder, nods, then begins to answer as Murray quickly interrupts Thomas. Murray says, "Yup, that's the beanpole replacing Stewart." Murray chortles to himself and continues, "Could you imagine getting shit canned by your own uncle?" Murray exaggerates his evil laugh as Big Bob has had enough. Big Bob says, "Hey, asswipe, Stewart's got 2 kids and a wife." Murray shrugs off the criticism and says, "Hey, Elizondo, isn't there a lawn you should be maintaining somewhere?" Janelle cries out, "Hey, Poppy, where's the love?" Big Bob rises to his feet, then heads in Murray's direction just as Thomas rises to stop him. Thomas barks out, "Boys, settle down, now!" They do as told and take their seats as Big Bob commiserates to Thomas. Big Bob says, "Tommy, that dink wrinkle is so far up Dennis's ass, he caught his last polyp for him." Murray flips Big Bob the middle finger and says, "Why don't you scratch my hairy beanbag, gaucho?" An agitated Thomas spins and stares at Murray. Thomas says, "What the hell happened to you, Murr? When did you become president of the Dennis Christian Fan Club?" Murray rises from his chair and readies to leave and says, "Who needs this shit? Not me." Murray nods at Logan and Janelle and says, "Peace out, bro, and as always, lovely one, Charmed." Murray quickly vacates the area as the crew then look at Logan in amazement. Thomas asks Logan, "What the hell happened to Murray, bro? He was always a decent Joe." Logan shakes his head and responds, "It's something at home. I heard Marta screaming at him about money." Big Bob says, "Screw that douchebag." Thomas chuckles, then notice Remy is visibly upset. Thomas asks to Remy, "You okay, kid?" Remy stares blankly ahead. Janelle asks, "Holy shit, Steele, you seen a ghost?" Remy shakes his head in awe and says, "Dennis Christian." A curious Janelle furrows her brow and asks, "Was wondering that. How did Green Pea get right on the floor?" Remington shrugs his shoulders and says, "Don't know. Came here for the detailer spot Grandma found online." Remy rubs his eyes and answers, "The rest is still kind of a blur." Interior, Dennis Christian's waiting room, day. Remington sits nervously, tapping his foot and staring at the large oak door embossed with the name Dennis Christian, managing partner, upon it. Remy's eyes widen as he hears muffled screaming from inside Dennis's office. The door flies open and a mortified Remy freezes in place. The pencil-thin frame of Stewart Christian, late 20s, slinks through the now open doorway. Stewart is closely followed by Dennis Christian, early 60s, a 5'0", mostly balding maniac who is in mid-scream. He yells out, "Now get your insubordinate ass off of my goddamn property!" Just before reaching the waiting room's exit door, Stewart turns to Dennis. He says, "But, Uncle Dennis!" Dennis quickly interjects, "Uncle Dennis nothing. Mock me in front of my team? Get out of my sight and don't let the door hit your ass on the way out." Stewart begins to cry as he exits the waiting room. Dennis shakes his head. He mutters to himself, "That's why you never hire family." Dennis turns, walks towards his office door, but just before reaching it, Remy's cell phone activates. Dennis stops in his tracks, then turns to greet a now visibly shaken Remy, who is fumbling to reject his phone call. Dennis calmly asks, "And who in the hell are you?" Remington says, Remington Pearson, sir." Dennis answers, "And you're here for?" Remy stands at attention and answers, I'm here to meet your receptionist, sir, for the detailer's position I saw online. I waited, but she hasn't shown yet. Dennis snaps his fingers and answers, well, welcome to the big leagues, buddy boy. You're my new salesman. Dennis escorts Remy to the exit door as he begins to bark orders at him. Dennis says, listen up, Beanpole. Get your ass down the hall. They reach the door, then Dennis points down the hallway. Dennis continues, go see Larry Babson. Tell him you're replacing shit for brains. He'll know what you mean. Yes, sir, Remington answers. Remy scurries down the hallway as Dennis mutters under his breath, then turns back to his office door. Interior, Nissan service area, early evening. The sales crew are listening to Remington finish his tale. Remington says, my head's still spinning. Inch for inch, that's the scariest human being I've ever met. Janelle drapes her arm around Remy and says, not what you and Grandma were expecting, huh? Logan nods in agreement with Janelle, then notices Thomas and Big Bob laughing about something. Logan asks, what's up with you two jokers? Big Bob answers, just busted my man's coconuts on how I got him in the biz. Janelle snaps to attention and asks, no shit, never heard this one. Big Bob leans back into his chair. He says, oh yeah, Tommy and I go way back. Met this stud when he was running the Encore. Man, this super hot club down in Fort Lauderdale. Thomas looks at Big Bob and smiles. Thomas says to Big Bob, long time, bro. Big Bob begins to get visibly animated as he continues. This guy had the 3 Fs. Fine women, free weed, and hanging with his best bud, his father. Thomas waves off Big Bob's praise, but says, holy shit, do I miss that guy. Give up 5 years of my life today to spend just one more weekend golfing with my pop. Everyone at the table pauses for a moment, seemingly remembering someone special. Remy seems puzzled. He asks, what made you leave all that, Tommy? Janelle quickly interjects, she happened. Remington asks, who's she? Janelle says, okay, I'm 3. Janelle nods to Big Bob and Logan, then they 3 call out, in unison, Stacy, the Hurricane, Wayne! Ding, ding, ding! Thomas drops his hand in hands as the crew laugh. Interior, the Encore nightclub, night. The darkened nightclub is rocking with its hundreds of patrons and staff, all enjoying the festivities. Enjoying a cocktail at one of the club's many bars is a considerably younger Big Bob. He is intently watching some few pretty girls that are shaking their stuff on the central dance floor. Big Bob spots a noticeably younger Thomas emerging from a DJ booth, tips his drink to Thomas, then Tommy nods recognition in return. Thomas makes his way through a sea of adoring partygoers, eventually making his way over to Big Bob. Thomas says, Brohim, what's kicking? Bob scans the crowded floor and answers, what's not? You got it all, kid. A confident Thomas smiles. Big Bob points out a statuesque blonde woman chatting with some girlfriends at a nearby group of tables. Big Bob says, but I think I found a tigress that you can't even tame, Tommy boy. Thomas's jaw nearly drops when the blonde beauty notices his gaze and returns a coy smile. Big Bob says, you know Miguel from the pawn shop next door? That's his soon-to-be ex-wife, Stacy. Thomas cannot take his eyes off Stacy as she flips her hair and laughs to a friend. Thomas says, no shit. Big Bob says, but remember, little bro, beauty and crazy are a 1-to-1 ratio. Thomas turns and waits for the punchline. Big Bob says, if she's a beauty 8, she's a crazy 8. A mesmerized Thomas scoffs at Big Bob's notion and says, that's a supermodel right there, buddy boy. Definitely a 9. Big Bob says, yeah? Know the only way a 9 becomes a 10, Tommy boy? Thomas shrugs his shoulders as Bob continues. If she's mute and can't talk, that's the extra point. The guys both hold up their arms to indicate a football's extra point is good. Thomas says, it's up. Big Bob adds, and good. Just as the duo share a laugh, A drunk patron sitting next to Stacy reaches out and grabs her ass. The guys stare in amazement as in one motion, Stacy calmly tosses her beer bottle into the air, smashes the drunk across the mouth with her open hand, then completes her spin while catching the beer bottle before it reaches the ground. The drunk slides into his chair, passes out from the thrashing as his buddies explode in laughter. Stacy takes a sip of her beer as Thomas leans into Big Bob and says, "Now that's my destiny standing right there." Stacy and Thomas's eyes meet. She smiles at him, then with her pointer finger seductively beckons him to her. An enchanted Thomas smiles back, then heads her way. Big Bob calls out, "Good luck, big game hunter. You're gonna need it." Interior Nissan service area, early evening. The crew all watch Thomas shake his head and laugh at himself while finishing his tale. Thomas says, "Guess shrinking violets were never my forte." Big Bob raps Thomas on the back, then belly laughs. He says, "Crazy how quick you went from hunter to prey." Janelle adds, "I love that crazy blonde Amazon. Stacy's the most real chick I know." Janelle turns to Thomas, grabs her tie, and in a Rodney Dangerfield impersonation, jokes, "Yeah, and Stacy's a screamer, in a good way." Big Bob adds, "American Gothic, the Waynes definitely are not." Janelle says, "You know what's really hot, though? The way you two still look at each other. I love how much you love that girl." Thomas smiles while nodding in agreement. He says, "I love how we can be in a car for hours together and never turn on the radio. We've always been best friends like that." Remington smiles and says, "That's really nice." Big Bob slaps Thomas on the back. He adds, "Doesn't hurt she still looks like that supermodel we first met." The crew crack up as Nick Mason, mid-30s, enters the scene, just in time to catch Big Bob's proclamation. Nick walks behind the seated Thomas, then playfully rubs Tommy's shoulders. Nick says, "Poor Tommy boy never stood a chance. Being raised by 5 older sisters up in Jersey, he just smiles, nods, and does what he's told." Thomas makes a severe twitching motion and adds, "Yeah, I got this twitch to boot." Big Bob says, "Met Tommy's family. Add in your mom, that's 6 completely different personalities." Thomas says, "Yup, I was looking for lucky number 7. Remington claps his hands together and interjects, "I get it, you found crazy 8. The table ignites in laughter as Nick points at Remington. Nick says, "Now that's funny, it's Remington, right?" Remy nods in accordance, then as they share a fist pump. Nick says, "Nick Mason here, buddy. You need anything, you holler." Remy smiles just as Nick's cell phone rings. His cell phone says, "It's your wife calling. Pick up, pick up, pick up. It's your wife calling." Nick accesses his phone, then excuses himself from the table. Nick says, "I gotta take this." Nick begins speaking into the phone as he heads towards the service area's exit door. Janelle shakes her head in disbelief and says, "That Annie's a tough nut. I swore to her that you boys stayed in the van all night." Thomas adds, "Old Mickey Ambruso gets the Tampa Bay knobber, and Nicky catches all the heat." Logan adds, "Still don't know how that stripper called his cell." Janelle says, "Oh, sweet Jesus. When Andy answered that call," Thomas looks up, watches Nick exit the service area, then makes the sign of a cross and says, "Dominus onus, Nicky boy." Exterior, Nissan service area's welcome center, early evening. One of the service area's glass doors swings open. Nick emerges while in mid-conversation on his phone. Nick says, "My prayers have been what?" The screen splits, showing Nick on one side and Annie Mason, mid-30s, with a view from her cell phone's camera on the other side. Annie sets her phone down on a dresser, then walks towards her bed that has just come into view. Annie answers, "Your prayers have been answered, honey." Nick says, "How's that, babe?" Annie takes a seat on her bed. She says, "Just got off the phone with the strip club's manager up in Tampa." Nick grins as Annie strokes her long blonde hair. She says, "He said you and Tommy must have been the 2 schmucks from Jersey the Nissan crew were laughing about all that night." Nick says, "I told you, babe."
Annie spreads her legs and strokes her inner thighs. Annie says, just like you boys promised me and Stacy, playing gin rummy in the van all night while the crew partied. Yup, and it was two-handed pinochle with a dead hand, but I digress, Nick says. Annie flips over on the bed, then grabs at her G-string. She says, now that's hot. Nick salivates as Annie abruptly sits up. She says, my mom's bringing the kids home at 10 sharp. A serious look overcomes Annie's face as her brow furrows. Be here by 9 on the dot. Your 40 days of wandering in the celibate desert are over. An exasperated Nick proclaims, but babe, you know Dennis will have my head if we split early. An irritated Annie springs to her feet and says, remember your sales training, baby. Triers try, doers do. Nick proclaimed, fuck. Annie says, oh, my love, here's your new paradigm. The gates to this oasis, they shut promptly at 9. Nick's eyes nearly bulge out of his head as Annie reaches over and goes to hang up their call. I'm on it, he yells. Nick darts down the service lane's driveway, then around the corner of the dealership towards the tower. Interior, Dennis Christian's waiting room, night. Murray, seated in the waiting area, gleefully eavesdrops on the muffled screams emanating from behind Dennis's door. The oak door flies open, then Gary emerges in mid-argument. Gary yells out, this is bullshit, Dennis. Dennis flies through the open door. He says, I'm from Philly, knucklehead. Everything I say is bullshit. An enraged Gary turns to confront Dennis. Sensing the impending altercation, Murray attempts to come between them. He says to Gary, go easy, brother. Gary's attention is drawn away from Dennis as he shoves the oncoming Murray back into his seat. Gary says to Murray, brother, only in law, Mother Hubbard. If my Lisa and your Marta wouldn't kill me, I'd snap you in half, turncoat. Gary turns back to confront Dennis, but Dennis has snuck back to the threshold of his door. He yells out, get the hell out of my office, Kendallson. Gary says, I got 50 guys' lives on the line here, Dennis. Dennis answers, you're the schmuck who bet your team of misfits could hit 500. It's just a good business decision on my part, douchebag. Gary goes to charge Dennis, but then thinks better of it. Gary says, I don't care what it takes, Christian. We're hitting that triple bonus if it kills me. Dennis snaps his fingers, beckoning Murray to follow him. Dennis says to Gary, it just may. Dennis glares at Murray and says, okay, hey, Benedict Arnold, my office. Murray does as told as the still muttering Gary storms out of the waiting room. Interior, Dennis's office, night. Dennis, seated behind his large oaken desk, types away on his computer keyboard. Murray patiently waits for his orders. Dennis says, here's how it's going down. I'm flying up to New York tomorrow, right after the morning meeting. Dennis pulls 2 stacks of wrapped $100 bills out of his desk drawer, then places them directly in front of the now salivating Murray. Dennis says, this is your 1%, Mr. Sales Manager. $20K is your cut when Gary's goof-offs shit the bed. Murray drools as Dennis drags the cash away, then he locks the money back inside the same drawer. Murray answers, anything. Dennis says, I like that attitude. Hey, I'm gone till the 1st. Dennis sinisterly smiles. Should be like shooting fish in a barrel for you, Murray. I stopped all the media and incentives until next month. No way they hit the 500. Murray continues taking notes as Dennis spins his chair and says, just sit on the place like an egg, chicken boy. Murray leans back into his chair and contemplates the wealth and power he will be shortly receiving. Interior, sales tower, night. Gary takes a seat behind his desk, then takes a deep breath as Nick and Mickey Ambruso, mid-70s, enters the tower from the front lot access door. Nick calls out, what's up, boss man? Nick and Mickey watch as Gary pulls a few pills from his pocket, throws them into his mouth, then downs the pills with a large swig of the Jack Daniels bottle that was sitting by his feet. Mickey says, I'm betting something's afoul. Gary takes a second downing of the Jack bottle and shakes his head yes in agreement, then points at Mickey. Gary says, Yahtzee! A disheartened Nick rolls his eyes and says, "Aw, shit, I'll come back." Nick turns to leave the tower as Mickey then halts Nick's progress. Mickey says to Gary, "What the kid's not trying to say is that I screwed him royally." Mickey puts his arm around Nick and continues to Gary. "His wife closed her Golden Gates because of my fun up in Tampa." Gary rolls his eyes and asks, "All right, I'm game. What's up?" Nick reaches down and grabs his crotch. He says, "Annie gave me a small window of time to free Willie here, boss. I got split early." Gary shakes his head in disbelief and says, "Are you joking? You know how Dennis freaks." Mickey answers, "Hey, put this one on my tab. Dennis owes me a few markers." Gary reluctantly agrees and says, "It's your ass. And Tommy's, right?" Nick nods in agreement and says, "Just please avoid Murray and Babson on your way out. I don't need any extra shit right now." An overjoyed Nick begins to text Annie. Gary asks Mickey, "So, got yourself some up in Tampa?" Mickey answers, "Shit, since Camille died, I'll take it wherever I can get it." Nick finishes his good news text. He asks Mick, "Just curious, Mick, what type of women you go for now?" Mickey answers, "Let me put it this way. Until my 40s, I was an ass man." Gary smiles as he knows a good joke is afoot as Mickey continues. "My 50s and 60s turned into a breast man." Nick asks, "How about now in your 70s? Mick grabs his wrist and checks for a sign of life. He yells out, "I'm a pulse man now, kid. If hers is still beating, I'm all in." The trio crack up. Then Gary regains his composure and says to Nick, "Just do me a favor. Let the crew know I'm calling a meeting in 10. Nick answers, "On it, and thanks, boss." Nick splits the tower to inform everyone while Gary and Mickey discuss the plans. Exterior, front of the Nissan dealership, night. Nick emerges through the tower door, then spots Janelle and Logan chatting together about 50 feet from his position. Nick makes his way over to the duo, then fist pumps Logan. Nick asks, "What's kicking?" Janelle scans the lot, then grabs one of her breasts. She jokes, "Gonna have to start using my milk for a creamer if nobody shows up." Nick attempts to ease their worries and says, "Think Gary's got something up his sleeve. He's calling a meeting in 10. Logan answers, "I sure hope so, bro." Nick asks, "Anybody seen Tommy?" Janelle shakes her head no, then starts to laugh aloud. She says, "Do you remember when Stacy picked up Dennis and spun his little ass around at the Christmas party?" Janelle stomps her foot and yells out, "I actually peed myself a little." As the group laugh away, Tommy suddenly approaches them. Thomas asks, "What's so funny?" The group goes silent for a second, then crack up in tandem. Thomas answers, "The Christmas party." Thomas rolls his eyes as Janelle slaps him on the back. She says, "Love you too, Tommy, but that badass bitch of yours is fucking cray-cray." Thomas answers, "You don't know the half of it. I'm up Schitt's Creek without one more deal to hit bonus." Thomas looks to the heavens and calls up to the skies. She just had to have those couches. Interior, the Wayne's duplex living room, day. Sprawled out upon a set of matching leather sofa and love seat are Stacy Wayne, mid-30s, and Shelley, late 20s, who is noticeably pregnant. Shelley eases into the love seat's soft leather and says, "It's like laying on a cloud." Stacy answers, "I know, Shell, right?" Stacy strokes the couch's fabric and says, "Granted, it was at a closeout sale with no returns, and it did put a little pinch on our budget." Stacy grabs her wine glass and takes a sip. She says, "Was just hoping Tommy would say yes." A loud laugh resonates from the conjoined kitchen area of the Wayne's duplex. The voice says, "Ha, that's a good one." Stacy says, "What's so funny in there, Missy?" Amber Diaz, early teens, half-Cuban version of Stacy, walks into the living room. She says, "Come on, Mom. When has Thomas ever said no to you?" Stacy waves off Amber's notion as Amber takes a seat next to Shelley. Amber says to Shelley, "Shelley, do you know how many Stacy Waynes it takes to screw in a light bulb?" Shelley chuckles as Amber mocks up holding a light bulb. Amber answers, "Just one. Mom just holds up the bulb and Tommy thinks the world should revolve around her." Stacy says, "You're crazy, kiddo." Amber purses her lips and furrows her brow and continues, "Crazy, huh? Shelley, how do you think we wound up down here in shit-kicker USA?" Shelley shrugs her shoulders as Amber continues, "I'll tell you how. We were living large up near my grandparents in Myrtle Beach. Tommy had this fat beach house." Amber snaps her fingers and continues, "I blink my eyes. My older brother Angel moves to my bio dad's in Miami. Mom can't live so far from one of her babies, so she cries to Thomas, then poof!" Amber makes a dramatic hand gesture as Stacy has had enough. She says, "Are you done?" Stacy turns to Shelley and continues, "Okay, she pretty much is on point. But the thought of one of my babies being raised by that ex of mine." Stacy's eyes light up in anger and continues, "Son of a bitch still owes me over 10 grand in arrearages for child support." Amber attempts to stand and vacate her mom's tirade, but is coerced by Shelley to stay. Shelley says, "I just love that you're both here. Who cares how?" Amber gives Shelley a hug as Stacy smiles. Exterior, front of the Nissan dealership, night. The same group from moments earlier laugh as Thomas finishes his tale. Thomas says, "My Amber, I love my boys, but that kid slays me." Janelle says, "Is Amber the Pete of Stacy's pot or what? I loved having them both down at the beach house." Thomas says, "Amber thinks you are the coolest chick on the planet." Janelle jokingly shrugs her shoulders and says, "What can I say? She's got impeccable taste." Logan makes a figure-8 gesture with his hands, then whistles. Logan says, "Talk about impeccable taste and beachwear. Nikki, did you catch a glimpse of that neighbor of Tommy's last week?" Nick answers, "A glimpse? What am I, fucking blind?" Thomas answers, "I know, right? When she walked over in that tiny bikini." Logan answers, "Even 3 months prego." Logan bites his palm as Nick tries to make a small triangle with his fingers. Nick asks Janelle, "And that wasn't tiny or micro. What the hell would you call that thing she barely had on?" Janelle answers, "It's called a Morse code bikini. Hey, I got one in red." Janelle steps back from the group and touches both of her nipples with according pointer fingers. She answers, "Yeah, it's only 2 dots." Janelle makes a slashing motion straight down her crotch and says, "And a dash." The guys stomp their feet as over the public address system, Gary's voice calls out. Gary's voice says, "Available sales, finance, and reception. Please report to the conference room. 5 minutes, everyone." The group all turn to make their way back inside. Nick says to Thomas, "Here we go, bro." Thomas answers, "Yeah, man. Shitstorm or savings grace. Film at 11. They all make their way into the front doors. Interior, Nissan's conference room, night. The stadium seating conference room begins to fill with the 40 or so staff. Already positioned near the top row of the raised seating area are Big Bob, Logan, and Remington. Thomas and Nick climb the stairs to meet the crew, then take their seats just in front of Big Bob. Nick says, "That works perfect, Tommy." Thomas nods as Nick leans back to confirm with Big Bob. Nick says, "Bobarino, you'll run cover for me, then Tommy will finagle his way out of here somehow." Thomas says, "I'll get my move on. Nicky'll get his groove on." Logan leans down to the lower row and asks, "Moving? Who's moving where?" Thomas rolls his eyes and answers, "Not by choice, bro." Nick proclaims, "I just knew that group of guys moving in next door spelled trouble." Thomas says, "Oh man, I just can't catch a break." Thomas shakes his head in amazement as Big Bob taps him on the shoulder. Exterior, the Wayne's duplex's front yard, day. The calmness of the bright early morning is broken when Andrew Diaz, nearly 12 years old, dashes out the front door of the Wayne's duplex. Andrew heads down the driveway, then remembers he has forgotten something. Andrew bunks himself on the head, turns to head back inside, then sees Stacy standing at the front door waiting for him. Stacy pulls a piece of paper from the pocket of the robe that she has draped over herself. Stacy says to Andrew, "Forget something, boo-boo?" Andrew scampers up the walkway, then greets his mom. He says, "You mean besides my permission slip?" Stacy hands him the slip of paper, then Andrew points at his neck. He jokes, "Nope, you and Dr. Frankenstein bolted my head on so I wouldn't forget it at home." Stacy chuckles, spins Andrew around, then playfully swats his behind. She says, "All right, Andrew, off to school." Andrew quickly turns, gives Stacy a peck on the cheek, then heads back to school. Stacy continues, "You've been hanging around Tommy too long, Mr. Funny Man." A loud catcalling whistle blares out that catches both of their attentions. Stacy looks over to see the source of the whistle, then spots two young men, both early 20s, carrying duffel bags and gawking at her. Young man number one stomps his foot, then calls out loud enough for Stacy to hear him. He says, "Now that's what I'm talking about." Young man number two adds, "We hit the super hot mama for a new neighbor jackpot." Just as Stacy cinches her bathrobe shut, she spots Amber leisurely strolling out the front door of their new neighbor's house. Amber instantly feels Stacy stare, but nonchalantly walks towards the guys while waving goodbye. Amber says, "Later, boys." Young man number one says, "Now I see what you got, girl." Amber playfully flips her hair, then hurries the rest of the way over to Stacy. Amber says, "Hey, Mom." Stacy says, "Don't hey, Mom, me." Stacy pulls Amber closer, then sniffs her hair. Amber pulls back and says, "Mom, don't embarrass me. You know I don't smoke weed." Amber reaches into her purse, pulls out a small vial of perfume, then applies it to her neck. Amber continues, "But don't want to reek old Mary Jane, right?" Stacy opens the front door, reaches in, then grabs a set of keys and her purse. Stacy locks the front door. She says, "Just get in the car, Missy. I'm driving you both into school today." Amber and Andrew comply with Stacy's demand. The trio get into their Nissan Altima that's parked in the driveway. Stacy peels the sedan down the driveway, then speeds away down the street. Exterior, the Wayne's duplex's backyard, night. Big Bob and Thomas are standing at one end of the Wayne's backyard deck, watching an incident as it unfolds. Stacy is arguing with Frank Fatizzi, late 50s, near the wooden stairway on the opposite side of the deck. Frank says, "You're not hearing me, Mrs. Wayne. You have no legal right to demand anything." Thomas says, "Hey, Frank, ease up, man." Frank turns in Thomas's direction, then points at him. He says, "I'm trying to be reasonable. I checked and those boys have medical marijuana cards." Stacy waves off Thomas's assistance and says, "Babe, I got this." Thomas backs off, then Big Bob laughs. Big Bob says, "I do not see this going well for Frank." Stacy implores to Frank's humanity. She says, "I have two impressionable young kids I'm trying to raise here, Mr. Fatizzi. I'm begging you to..." Frank sticks up his hand in defiance and says, "Save it, would you? Hey, try keeping that daughter of yours away from next door." Stacy says, "What did you say?" Frank starts laughing in Stacy's face and says, "I said put a leash on that little bitch." Frank starts laughing harder as he begins down the deck stairs. Stacy taps Frank on the shoulder. He turns and is greeted with a smashing right hook to the jaw from Stacy's fist. Frank tumbles down the stairs. Stacy leaps down the stairs, then stands above Frank's crumpled mass. She yells out, "Who's the little bitch now, sleazy Fatizzi?" Big Bob explodes in laughter as Thomas sprints over to see the results of Stacy's carnage. Interior, Nissan's conference room, night. Thomas, still sitting with the crew, snaps his fingers and says, "Then just like magic, there went my last $9,000 in savings, just keeping her out of jail." Big Bob comfortingly taps Thomas on the back and says, "You know she was just protecting her babies." Thomas says, "I know how protective she is of all of us. Just wish she was as protective with my bank account." Thomas rubs his hands through his hair and says, "Hope Gary's got some good news." The room comes to a hush as Gary enters the conference room. Gary heads over to, then reaches the large white dry eraser board that's positioned in the front of the room. Gary grabs a marker, then begins to write in large characters on the board for all to see. 447 plus 53 equals 500. 3 times bonus. I fucked up. Gary spins around to face his crew. Gary yells out, "I fucked up." In a near rage, Gary grabs a folded chair that's leaning on a wall, then slings it with all of his might. The chair frisbees towards the open window as Gary watches his folly unfold. The chair flies through the open window, then seconds later, crashing is followed by a car's alarm activating. Gary speeds over to, then reaches the open window as the crew do their best to see what's happening. Gary yells out, "Holy shit!" Exterior, Nissan's conference room window / detail area, night. Gary leans partway out of the window, looks down, and sees that the chair has crashed through the sunroof of a Maxima. There are 2 detailers currently cleaning the Maxima 2 floors below him. Number 1 detailer says, "What the hell, Gary?" Detailer number 2, "Hell of a shot, hole in one." Gary waves down to the pair, "Sorry, guys." Gary reaches into his pocket, pulls out a set of keys, pushes the key fob, then the car alarm from below turns off. Gary pulls himself back into the conference room. Interior, Nissan's conference room, night. Gary slowly shuts the window, turns to greet the crew who are all scampering back to their seats. Gary says, "I misspoke. I fucked up. Twice." The crew retake their seats as Gary reaches the front of the room, then restarts his meeting. Gary says, "I don't know how else to say it. We're all in deep trouble." Big Bob calls down to Gary. He says, "We all know that, boss. Just hit us between the eyes with it already." Gary scans his team and is warned that all are nodding. Janelle says, "What did that little asshole do now?" Gary takes it all in and feels the trust in his team's faces. Gary says, "All right, here's the deal. Last week when we hit 400, Dennis came strolling in here with Terry Taylor. If you don't know, that's our big shot CEO. He owns 57 auto malls around the Southeast." Gary grits his teeth and mocks wringing someone's neck. He says, "That little ball buster would not stop talking shit about all of us sucking ass to Terry." Gary gets real and continues. "Listen, it was an hour after close, and if you know me, I was already in my Jack and Xanax mode, so I was primed to pop." Gary turns and slams his fist on the eraser board. He says, "That motherfucker set us up. Mine and Kenny's bonus, your bonuses." Gary points over to the door and Carrie and Carla Shea, the twin sister pair of finance manager. Gary calls out, "Carrie and Carla's finance bonus. We hit 500, triple bonus." Logan yells out, "$4.99? Gary says, "We eat a shit sandwich as Dennis saunters into a $2 million townhouse up in the fucking Hamptons." Janelle asks, "What happened to all the traffic?" Janelle pushes her breasts together jokingly. She says, "I couldn't give it away on 7th Avenue right now." Gary says, "That scumbag stopped every bit of advertising. All the incentives and rebates from Nissan ended on the 21st. We're dead in the water." A loud groan from the staff lets the air out of the room. The lights in the rooms start to slowly dim. Just then, Thomas abruptly stands and a spotlight shines upon him. He says, "Wait a minute. What the hell am I hearing? I can't afford this shit. Are we badass car sharks or fucking little minnows, boys and girls?" Thomas begins to slowly descend the stairs as the spotlight follows him. He says, "This ain't your daddy's car business anymore." Thomas slams his fist into his open palm. He continues, "Every Grandma Moses who drives up on the lot, they know exactly what their car's worth and to the penny what we own ours for." Thomas continues his slow descent as he continues, "There's no profit margin anymore. It's all about moving that metal and hitting that bonus." Thomas reaches the bottom of the stairs and spins around. He continues, "It's time to dig deep. Time to see what we're actually made of. Let's help them, help us, help them." From the corner of the conference room, an old janitor stops his mopping and calls out, "I want to help them, help us, help them." Big Bob stands and another spotlight shines upon him. Big Bob says, "Why, thanks, Joe, the janitor guy. Now, let's call every dingleberry that's still clinging on the vine." The lights get brighter and brighter with each subsequent proclamation. Janelle yells, "Let's push that tin." Logan yells, "They're either buying or dying." Remy jumps to his feet and screams out in a crackled voice, "I'm all in." The screech of an LP record's needle is followed by the deafening silence. Then the room erupts in laughter. Gary calls out over the laughter, "Well then, if Remy's all in, we just gotta win." Gary waves for the staff to come in as Kenny calls out, "Bring it in, everybody." The entire staff quickly surround Gary. Gary says, "Here's the plan. Crush the phone room till 10. I'll have an open tab set up over Racetrack Pub until midnight." The staff start to get energized as Gary continues, "I know we fucking got this. Pound it down, but Cinderfellas, get your asses home so we can shove that 500 units straight up Dennis's ass tomorrow." Thomas shouts out, "Give me a 500 on 3. The entire staff says, 1, 2, 3, 500. Everyone cheers. Then they head towards the door to exit. Gary pulls Thomas to the side and says, "Thanks, Thomas. I owe you one, kid." Gary and Thomas follow the group out the door. Interior Nissan's phone room, night. The sales team are jammed into the phone room's many cubicles, all busy trying to contact customers. Dennis strides into the phone room through the open door. Dennis says to the sales team, "So, you must have heard my good news." The team all stay focused on their tasks at hand and avoid eye contact as Dennis leisurely strolls around the room. Dennis says, "Listen, it's nothing personal, just business, that's all." Dennis stops next to the desk Thomas is occupying and says, "You guys just booked your passage on the Titanic, and I think I see an iceberg coming your way." Dennis laughs as he readies to exit the room. He continues, "Well, good luck with doing all that due diligence and futility." Dennis sinisterly chortles, then slams the door shut upon exiting. A large poster of Dennis smiling is pasted on the now closed side of the door, and it comes into view. The poster has the phrase, "Keep smiling and dialing," printed in large letters on the bottom of it. Seconds later, a hurled pocket knife sticks into the door, hitting its mark right between Dennis's eyes. Foing! Interior, the Wayne's duplex's kitchen slash living room, night. Stacy walks in through the duplex's front door with a pep to her step. Stacy smiles as she walks through a living room that has been emptied of all large furniture and left only with stacked labeled boxes and a few suitcases. Stacy walks through the maze of boxes, reaches the kitchen, then calls out to the electronic tablet on the countertop. It's leaning up against a large box labeled dishes. Stacy says, "I'm back, babe." Thomas's face appears on the tablet screen. He answers, "Hey, gorgeous." Stacy continues packing up the kitchen and asks, "Any luck, Tommy?" Thomas shows disappointment on his face. He answers, "Trying to set something up for tomorrow. Nick's going to holler around 8, so I'll be home after that, if I can slip past Dennis with my nutsack still intact." Stacy rolls her eyes and says, "Love you, baby. Go do that voodoo." Andrew walks into the kitchen and interjects, having just heard Stacy's remark. He answers, "You mean that voodoo that Tommy doo-doo?" An excited Thomas calls out to Andrew, "Hey there, buddy boy, you got everything ready for your mom?" Andrew waves Thomas off and answers, "Hours ago, Pops. Headed over to Robbie's house for the night in a few." Andrew pulls a deck of cards out of the back of his pocket and waves them at Thomas. Andrew says, "Hey, been practicing my Rodney Dangerfield." Thomas smiles as he goes into their obviously practiced routine. Thomas says in a Rodney Dangerfield voice, "Oh yeah, I heard your mom signed you up for a bridge club." Andrew holds up the cards and tries his impersonation. He says, "She sure did. I jumped off next Tuesday." The boys crack up as Stacy rolls her eyes. She says, "You are the two biggest nerds I have ever met." Thomas regains his composure and says, "Love you, sonny boy. Hey, go check on your sister's progress for me, will you?" Andrew shoots Thomas a thumbs up, then bolts out of the kitchen. Thomas says to Stacy, "I'm off, love you." Stacy blows Thomas a kiss, then waves goodbye. Stacy says, "See you tonight, babe." Stacy touches the tablet screen and hangs up the call. Stacy picks up a glass of water, takes a sip, and notices that it's warm. Stacy walks over to the refrigerator, pulls open the freezer door, and spots a bottle of chilled liquor laying on its shelf. Stacy says, "Well, hello there." Stacy pulls the AC bottle from the shelf, then surveys the kitchen. She says, "I've done a hell of a job here already, maybe just one little shooter." Stacy breaks the bottle's seal as ominous music is heard. Dum, dum, dum. Interior, Nissan's phone room, night. The sales crew are all smiling and dialing in what seems like a pointless exercise. Thomas shows some frustration when he removes his headphones, then tosses them at his computer screen. Thomas's cell phone vibrates on his desktop, then a photo of Nick and Annie appear on its screen. Thomas taps the answer button and says, "Hey, what's up, kid?" Nick over the speakerphone says, "T-minus 15 minutes, Tommy. I'm headed towards the Beamer and I'm ready to roll, stud." Thomas answers, "Cool, let me check if the coast is clear." Thomas jumps up, hurries over to the still closed door, then slowly swings it open. Thomas leans his head through the doorway, but draws back quickly, having just seen Dennis, Murray, and Larry Babson, late 50s, who were inspecting the area. Thomas eases the door closed and heads back to his desk. Thomas says, "How in the hell did you get out of here? Dennis's damn minions are everywhere." Nick over the speakerphone says, "Gary told me that he owed you one. He said slide over to the computer room and check out your terminal." Thomas says, "Excellent. Don't sweat it. I'll be there." Thomas hangs up the call, hurriedly grabs his possessions, then heads towards the exit. Interior, Nissan's computer room, night. Thomas enters the darkened computer room, carefully closes the door, then locks it. Thomas flips one of the light switches, activating a small set of lights above a back row of computer training terminals. Thomas heads over to the terminals, notices that his terminal has an icon blinking on its computer screen. Thomas takes a seat at his terminal, then hits the enter button on the keyboard. The computer screen activates as a flash drive protruding from the main drive lights up. A familiar face, one resembling John Voight portraying Mr. Phelps, appears on the computer screen. He says, "Good evening, Mr. Wayne. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to first get past this man." A picture of Dennis in mid-screen appears at the corner of the computer screen. Mr. Phelps continues, "Been rumored he's got the heart of the last escapee and a jar of formaldehyde on his desk." Thomas watches intently as pictures of Murray and Larry Babson appear on opposite corners of the screen. Mr. Phelps continues, "McCoy and Babson, these two hemorrhoid huggers will sell you down the river in a heartbeat." The pictures disappear as Mr. Phelps gets deadly serious. He says, "The escape route is on your phone. Now follow it to the letter and get your ass home to Stacy." Thomas replies, "Got it." Thomas checks the time on his phone as Mr. Phelps says, "We will disavow any knowledge of your actions should you be killed or captured. This flash drive will self-destruct in 5 seconds. Good luck, Thomas." The screen goes dark. Thomas waits for the self-destruct smoke to appear, but seconds later, Mr. Phelps reappears. He says, "Tommy, forgot that Cruise is using that self-destruct thing on his new MI film. Could you just smash it and toss it in the trash?" The screen goes dark. Thomas grabs the flash drive and quickly disposes of it. Thomas quickly makes his way to the exit door, unlocks it, then slowly peers in the hallway. The coast seems clear as Thomas then pulls a single match from his pocket. Thomas says, "I've always wanted to do this." Thomas strikes the match on his shoe. It ignites, then Thomas holds the flame to a superimposed fuse that begins to burn. The theme song from Mission Impossible begins to play as Thomas darts down the hallway. Exterior, helicopter flying in the sky, night. The theme music continues as Thomas, adorned in an orange prison jumpsuit, dangles from a rope ladder of a speeding helicopter. The helicopter nears, then hovers the ground. Thomas leaps the last few feet, landing in a barrel roll. Interior, Nick's waiting BMW, night. The MI theme music ends as Nick sits behind the BMW steering wheel. Nick stretches, checks his watch, then begins to scratch off a lottery ticket with a coin. Exterior, Nissan's back parking lot, night. The Mission Impossible theme music again plays softly. The scanning of large spotlights on a back wall of the dealership is seen. Distant echoes of guard dogs barking can be heard. Thomas, still wearing his orange prison uniform, pops up between two cars. Thomas scans the area, sprints to the back wall, then he notices something in a nearby bush. Thomas reaches into the bush, pulls out what appears to be a makeshift rope comprised of dress shirts and ties with a grappling hook at the end. He then tosses the hook over the wall. Thomas checks the rope's security with a sharp tug, and all looks good. Thomas shimmies up the wall, but is spotted just as he reaches the top. "Hey, there he is!" The spotlight shines on Thomas as he then pulls what appears to be a grenade from inside his jumpsuit. Thomas lobs the grenade towards the source of the voice, completes the up and over the wall, then starts rappelling. An explosion from the other side of the wall jars Thomas's grip as he dives the last few feet to the ground. Thomas tucks and rolls, then comes up in a full sprint the last 50 feet to Nick's awaiting ride. Interior, Nick's BMW, night. Nick's eyes light up as he finishes scratching his lottery ticket. Thomas, back in his shirt and tie, enters the BMW's passenger door as Nick says, "Bingo, $100. Hey, how'd it go, Tommy? Any hassles?" Thomas waves him off as he buckles up. "Nah, piece of cake, man. Let's hit it." Nick nods, then shifts the BMW into gear. Exterior, Nissan's back parking lot access road, night. The BMW's taillights break the darkness. The BMW speeds off into the darkness as the Mission Impossible theme music ends. Da-da! Interior, Nick's BMW, moving, night. Nick and Thomas sit quietly in their respective driver and passenger seats as the BMW motors up the interstate highway. Both stare straight ahead and wear the same worried looks upon their faces. Thomas tilts his head and leans it upon the passenger window, gazing out at the night's darkness. Thomas perks up as a familiar highway sign comes into focus and reads, "Crossroads Pier, 1 mile." Nick, having also noticed the same sign, smiles and Tommy says, "Remember, Nicky?" Nick says, "Like it was yesterday, bro." Thomas says, "Never would have thought that day when you asked me to jump in your Beamer." Nick finishes Thomas' thoughts and says, "What? That we'd go from being good friends to brothers?" Thomas says, "Exactly, man, exactly." Exterior, Interstate Highway, BMW/moving, night. The BMW approaches the exit for Crossroads Pier. The BMW seemingly splits into two BMWs. Number 1 BMW continues its trip up the highway. Number 2 BMW, which has a blurred, ghost-like quality, takes the exit for Crossroads Pier. BMW number 2 drives along a narrow country road, then disappears into a dense fog. Exterior, Crossroads Pier, day. Nick's BMW is parked underneath a large wooden pier as Thomas leans upon its shaded hood. Thomas watches Nick walking in the radiant sunshine. Nick kicks at a few pebbles lining the wide canal that flows underneath the long pier. Nick runs his hand through his hair while struggling to find the right words to express himself. Nick says, "I don't get it, Tommy. Why do I always come up short in Annie's eyes?" Thomas shakes his head in amazement as Nick continues. "I've made a pretty damn good living for my little family." Nick shows his exasperation and continues. "Shit. Annie and I played our music together in front of thousands, man. We traveled everywhere in the world before the kids were born." Thomas walks over to his lamenting friend as Nick wells up with a single tear. Nick says, "Feels like I'm never enough." Nick spins away from Thomas as Thomas tells him, being priority number 86, where she's always out of patience, always out of time, it's never an easy pill to swallow, bro. Just know this. Jesus brings people like us together for a reason. Thomas puts his arm lovingly around Nick and says, "It's funny, really, man. We could have met back up in Jersey years ago." Thomas releases his grip and spins Nick towards him. Thomas tells him, "But we're right here, man. Right now, man. The reason I know where you're coming from, Nick, it's because I've been where you've been." Nick finds consolation in Thomas's sentiment. Nick says, "I never really had a real brother. I haven't spoken to mine in years." Thomas smiles and taps Nick on the back and says, "Well, I guess you're stuck with me. Remember, man, I'm like toe fungus. Once I'm under your nail, you can never get rid of me." Nick smiles with relief as he then urges Thomas to head back to the BMW. Nick says, "Man, I don't plan on it. Come on, let's get back before someone misses us." The guys head towards their waiting ride. Interior, Nick's BMW, moving, night. Nick shakes his head to clear the last bit of emotions as he steers the BMW off the interstate. They pass a 7-Eleven, and Thomas takes notice as the car motors down a side road. Thomas says, "Gonna have Stacy drop me off at the 7-Eleven tomorrow morning." Nick nods in agreement as Thomas continues. "The new place is in the P section of town. Half of those new streets in there, they aren't even on GPS yet." Nick says, "Cool." Nick turns the steering wheel, heads the BMW down Thomas's home street, then checks the time on his phone. Nick exclaims, "Excellent, man, right on time." Nick pulls the BMW to the curb in front of Thomas's duplex. Thomas pops open the door, hops out to the curb, but then leans back into the BMW. Thomas says, "Hey, give Annie my best, bro." Nick laughs, "Oh, brother, I plan on it." Exterior, front of the Wayne's duplex, night. Thomas swings the car doors shut, waves to Nick, then watches the BMW speed away. Thomas turns to his duplex and notices something is awry. A gray fog covers the duplex as the theme music from The Exorcist begins to play. Thomas says, "Oh, this can't be good." Thomas shrugs his shoulders, then heads up the pathway to the duplex. Exterior, the Mason's estate, night. A large metal entrance gate slowly opens. Nick's BMW speeds through the now open entrance. It drag races up the long driveway and skids to a halt in front of the mini mansion. Nick hops out of the BMW, then checks his phone for the time. Nick says, "All right, man, 5 minutes to spare." Nick kicks up his heels, then heads for the front door. Upon reaching the front door, Nick stops, adjusts the excitement building in the front of his pants, then looks down at his groin. Nick says, "Easy there, big fella. We made it on time." Nick pulls at the front of his belt so he can see his own junk. Nick says, "And listen up, not a word about the bonus thing." Nick winks down at his groin and says, "Well, alrighty then." Nick grabs the keys from his pocket just as his erection seems to drag him forward. Nick says, "Easy, boy, damn, like a divining rod." Nick puts the key into the door, unlocks it, then opens it. Interior, the Mason's vestibule/living room, night. Nick walks in through the door, slides off his dress shoes, and enters the large, darkened living room. Nick passes a grandfather clock on his trip through the living room and down a nearby hallway. Nick smiles, noticing that it's only 2 minutes to 9 on the clock's face. Nick says to himself, "Oh, timing's everything, Nicky boy." Nick walks down the dimly lit hallway that's lined with the many framed photos of Nick, Annie, and their 2 young children. Nick reaches the first door on the left and smiles, seeing the sign hanging on the door. The sign reads, "Mom and Dad's Jam Session Room." Nick opens the door, flips the wall light switch, and calls into the room. Nick says, "Annie, baby, you in there?" The room's fluorescent lights fully engage, exposing the in-house music studio that's lined with Nick's many studio guitars, soundboards, and recording equipment. A wall-sized photo of a younger Nick rocking a guitar and a younger Annie singing in front of a packed audience comes into focus. Nick exits the jam room, walks down the hall to the next door on the left, then opens the door and enters. Interior, the Mason's bedroom, night. Nick enters his candlelit bedroom just as the grandfather clock strikes the first of its 9 tolls. A startled Nick hears something rustling to his right, turns and spots a scantily clad Annie who is prone and ready to strike. The loud growling of an attacking lioness is heard as Annie leaps at Nick, knocking them both out of scene and onto their nearby bed. Off camera, the sounds of the same lioness tearing into her happy prey are heard as the tolls on the grandfather clock chime and the scene fades to black. Exterior, the racetrack pub's parking lot, night. The overhead lit, jam-packed parking lot finds Murray exiting the driver's side door of a Nissan Altima demo. The Altima is parked directly under the racetrack pub street sign. Murray begins to walk towards the bar's front doors while in mid-conversation on his cell phone. Murray spots 2 familiar Maximas parked nearby. Murray says into his cell phone, "Just like you said, Dennis, Gary Kenny and their crew are all here." Dennis says over the speakerphone, "Perfect. Go charge a bottle of Cristal on Kendallson's tab for me." Murray nears the pub's entranceway as Dennis says, "All right, McAsswipe, keep me posted." The phone call ends as Murray readies to enter the pub. Just then, from around the corner of the pub, Murray hears someone sobbing loudly. Murray's curiosity overcomes him as he then walks over to find the source of the crying. As Murray scans the side parking lot, he spots Remington slumped on the hood of a car. Murray gets closer and sees a pile of vomit next to the car. Murray says, "Hey, holy shit, you okay, kid?" Remington gains some resemblance of balance, notices Murray, then stumbles towards him. Remington, in a slurred speech, says, Please help me." Remington stumbles, then throws his arms around Murray to stop his fall. Murray says, "Hey, kid." In a slurred speech, Remington says, I've never drank like this. Then I sniffed up this. Remington stands alone, then slowly rubs his temples. He says, "My head is on fire." Murray turns to leave the mess in front of him. Murray says, "Screw this noise." As Murray begins to walk away, Remington begins to sob aloud. Remington sobs, "Oh, please don't make me go back in there. I made such a fool of myself." Murray stops in his tracks, having heard Remington's pleas. A tear builds up in the corner of Murray's eye. Exterior, a high school's parking lot / drive-up / pickup area, day. A group of taunting teens standing near the entrance of a high school mock a student who is walking down the stairs. The student nears a Nissan Altima that's idling in the high school's pickup lane. Murray vaults out of the Altima's driver door, then calls out to the now sobbing student. Murray says, "Don't worry, MJ, Dad's here." MJ, mid-teens, throws his arms around Murray. MJ says, Daddy, please don't make me go back in there." Murray hugs MJ to calm him down as MJ continues, "I made such a fool of myself." Murray comfortably walks MJ to the passenger side of the car. Murray says, "Don't worry, kiddo. Dad's got you." Murray escorts his son into the passenger seat. Exterior, the racetrack pub, night. Murray stares blankly ahead, then wipes that tear from his eye. Murray spins around, then walks over to a quietly whimpering Remington. Murray says, "Hey, kiddo, don't worry, old Murray's got you." Remington says, "But I don't even know where my phone is. I can't even call an Uber." Murray says, "Give me your wallet, kid." Remington complies, hands the wallet over to Murray, then Murray inspects his driver's license. Murray says, "This where you live, buddy?" Remington drunkenly inspects, then points at his license and says, "That's it, 112 Walnut Street." Murray fatherly puts his arm around Remington. Murray says, "Come on, kid, that's just round the corner. I'm your Uber tonight." The guys walk arm in arm back to Murray's Altima. Remington tells Mr. McCoy, "You're nothing like the guys said you were." Murray chuckles while steadying Remington's gait. Murray says, "Thanks, kiddo. Come on now." Murray smiles as they continue their trek to the Altima. Exterior, 7-Eleven parking lot, day. The bright sunshine finds the 7-Eleven parking lot hopping this morning with Nick BMW pulls into the service station. The BMW pulls into a parking spot that has just been vacated in the front of the store. Interior, Nick's BMW, day. Nick shades his eyes against the morning's glare, shifts the car into park, then eases back into the driver's seat. Nick looks up, notices Thomas laboriously exiting the 7-Eleven's front door, then honks the BMW's horns. An oblivious Thomas misses the honking as Nick then rolls down his window. Nick calls out, "Tommy!" Thomas lifts his sunglasses, takes notice of Nick, then drags himself over to the passenger door. Nick says to himself, "Oh, this has gotta be good." Thomas opens the door, then gingerly takes his seat. Nick says, "Morning, stud." Thomas nods as Nick engages the transmission, backs out of the parking spot, then speeds away. They sit quietly, listening to a song on the radio as Thomas slumps into his seat and Nick finds the on-ramp to I-95. Nick merges into the BMW into traffic, then his curiosity has hit the breaking point. Nick says, "All right, man, what happened?" Thomas says, "What? You look like the poster boy for assisted suicide," Nick asks. Thomas turns Nick's way, exposing a large eye bruise. Thomas says, "It's really nothing." Nick, having caught a glimpse of Thomas' camouflaged black eye, snorts in laughter. Nick says, "Whole lot of nothing going on right there." Thomas says, "Just let it go, man." Nick says, "Yeah, like that's going to happen. Just give it up already." Thomas gingerly touches his bruise, then concedes. Thomas says, "Stacy, she always fights dirty, man, never clean." Thomas shakes his head gently and says, If I'm not looking, she'll hit me right below the belt, man, no matter how bad it felt." Nick laughs under his breath as Thomas continues, "I swear, sometimes she's just mean." Nick begrudgingly shakes his head in agreement and says, "Bro, your guys' love, it's like a match to gasoline." Thomas squints his eyes in pain as he remembers last night. Thomas says, "Really, it's my own fault." Nick glances at Thomas in disbelief and says, "Oh yeah, how's that?" Thomas says, "I forgot rule number 1 in the Happy Wife, Happy Life handbook." Nick chuckles and says, "Rule number 1? Thomas says, "Yup, never ever tell your wife when you think she's had too much to drink." Nick slaps his forehead and in a Homer Simpson-esque goes, "Don't!" Interior, the Wayne's duplex kitchen / living room, night. Thomas walks in through the front door of the duplex and is pleasantly surprised to find a mostly empty room. There are only a few large boxes left, along with a pink suitcase. Poised atop the pink suitcase is a teddy bear that Thomas scoops up on his way to the kitchen. Thomas hears Amber in the kitchen chatting with someone, sneaks up, then props the teddy bear up for Amber to see before entering. Thomas says, "Wow, thanks, Amber, for helping Tommy with the move." Thomas hops out of hiding, then sees Amber and Shelley standing in a nearly empty kitchen, all except for the large box labeled dishes. Amber says, "Paparino," as Shelley says, "Hey there, handsome." Thomas flamboyantly bows to the girls and says, "Well, hello, me lovelies." Thomas holds up the teddy bear and says, "Does ye remember first making Sir Corduroy's acquaintance, me fine lady?" Thomas tosses Corduroy over to Amber. Amber catches Corduroy, curtsies to Thomas, then spins to Shelley. Amber says, well, the way Thomas tells it, it was the day he fell in love with the idea of my dad. Thomas wells up a tear as he nods in agreement. Shelley says, "That's so sweet." Amber adds, "Was my 6th birthday, so Mom took me over to meet Thomas at his restaurant. What was the name of that place?" Thomas says, "The Encore. Any meal on the menu she wanted is what I said." Amber jokingly mocks, pointing at a menu and stomping her foot. In a babyish voice says, "I want escargots." Thomas says, when she put that snail in her mouth, it was the funniest face I've ever seen in my life. Thomas urges Amber to make the same face and says, "Come on, I'll do it with you." Amber capitulates and joins Thomas in making the funny face. Shelley laughs aloud as Amber hugs Corduroy. Amber smiles as she recalls a memory. Amber says, "Then for a gift, Thomas gave me Corduroy. Tell me how Grandma Wayne gave Corduroy to Tommy on his 6th birthday." Thomas's eyes lights up and he adds, "And now it was time for Corduroy's new adventures." Amber walks over and squeezes Thomas. Then he kisses her on the forehead. He says, "Love you, Diaz." Thomas swings his free arms and scans the free room. Thomas says, "Plus, I love how much you girls already got moved for me." Thomas snaps his fingers and says, "This should be a piece of cake." Shelley chuckles, grabs Corduroy from Amber, then places the bear next to the nearly finished bottle of Rumplemints that's sitting on the countertop. Shelley says, "What do you think, Corduroy? Gonna be a piece of cake here for Tommy?" Amber adds, "I don't know, 'cause I did all the lifting and carrying." Shelley says, "And I did the driving back and forth." From down the hallway, Stacy calls out unseeingly, "Baby!" Shelley laughs and says, "But little Miss Stacy, she did the drinking for all of us." Stacy makes her grand entrance into the kitchen, throws her arms around Thomas, then kisses him. Drunkenly, she says, "Sweetie, didn't we do great?" Thomas licks his lips and adds, "Oh yeah, and pepperminty fresh I taste." Stacy giggles, then attempts to pick up the box labeled dishes. Stacy drunkenly says, "Should only have one more trip, babe. Hey, I'll grab this." Stacy misjudges the weight of the heavy box, stumbles backwards, then tumbles to the ground. Amber calls out, "Smooth move, Drinky Poo." Thomas rushes over, then helps Stacy to her feet. Shelley calls out, "You okay, honey?" Stacy brushes herself off, then reassures everyone. A little more sober and says, "I'm fine." Stacy notices the bottle of Rumplemints next to Corduroy. She says, "Did shake the buzz right off." Stacy walks over to pour herself a shot. Thomas says, "Come on, babe. That tumble proves it. I think you've had enough." Stacy's green eyes light up in a death stare as Thomas gazes directly into her eyes. Stacy's hair turns to snakes as her Medusa stare slowly turns Thomas into stone. The stone Thomas begins to crack, then fall to the floor in chunks. Interior, Nick's BMW day. Nick shakes his head in disbelief and says, You're not a smart man, are you?" Thomas answers, No. Nick asks, "But what about the shiner?" Thomas again touches his swollen eye and answers, "Patience, young grasshopper. First things first, my next faux pas was forgetting happy wife rule number 2. Thomas laughs at himself and says, "Never wake a sleeping mother bear." Exterior, the Wayne's new home's driveway, night. The Wayne's Altima sits in the new driveway with its back doors open, but a dark interior. Thomas exits the front door of the new house. Thomas walks down the front yard pathway, reaches the Altima, then leans into the back seat. Thomas struggles with the weight of the box labeled dishes as he lifts it out of the back seat. Thomas gets a good grip on the box, then heads to carry it inside. Just as Thomas reaches the front of the Altima, the bottom of the box gives way, sending the many dishes it contained crashing to the ground. Interior, the Wayne's Altima / front passenger seat, night. Stacy is rudely awoken by the crashing sounds of dishes breaking, then her eyes flare red. Exterior, side of a mountain, night. Thomas, adorned in hiking gear, leans into a darkened cave. Thomas yells, echoing, "Hello, hello, hello!" A loud bear's growling emanates from inside the cave. Thomas, now realizing his folly, begins to run away and disappears off screen just as an enraged golden bear appears in the cave's entrance. The bear chases Thomas off screen. Then moments later, Thomas's cries are heard as the bear has caught up with him. Interior, the Wayne's new kitchen / night. Thomas stands alone in his new kitchen, holding his cell phone in hand. Thomas pushes the record button on the screen, then speaks at the phone. Thomas says, "Baby, I love you and don't get mad, but I really need you to see yourself." Thomas hastily positions his cell phone on a countertop to record the upcoming events. From an adjacent room to the kitchen, a door slamming is heard. An unseen yelling from Stacy calls out, "This conversation isn't over yet." Thomas opens the new freezer, pulls out a new bottle of Rumplemints, then cracks its cap. Thomas says, "Thanks for the housewarming gift, Barbarino." Thomas takes a large swig of the alcohol as Stacy enters the kitchen, holding Amber's teddy bear. Stacy says, "And this damn bear mocks me every time I see it." Thomas shakes as the ferocity of the 100-proof gulping hits his system, and he says, "But babe, I didn't have a gift for her." Stacy says, "If Amber only knew that Kelly, the sheer elegance model, gave it to you for a job well done." Thomas slams another shot of liquor and says, "How do you remember that shit? That was like 2 lifetimes ago." Stacy says, "Yeah, but how do you think it makes me feel thinking about your old girlfriends?" Thomas chuckles and says, "Hello, I fell in love with 3 living examples of your life before me, Stacy." Thomas stands tall and says, "And they call me Mom Dad." Stacy tosses corduroy into the living room and says, "So, what are you trying to say? I was a bad mom when I was with Miguel?" Thomas answers, "Who said anything about that? Oh, wait, your own sister said you two had the parental skills of a couple stray cats." Thomas grabs the Rumplemints bottle, then takes a belt as Stacy simmers. Thomas says, "But you've come a long way, baby." Thomas sets the bottle down on the counter. Thomas turns back to say something else, but is greeted by a smashing punch administered by Stacy to his eye. Thomas reels from the pain blast as Stacy shakes her hand in pain. Thomas screams out, "Are you crazy? All this over nothing?" Stacy runs to the freezer, swings open the door, and then sticks her throbbing hand in a sack of ice on a shelf. With her back now turned to him, Thomas runs out of the kitchen, then hurriedly opens and bolts out the front door. Stacy says, "Baby, I'm sorry. I know you didn't mean." Stacy turns and spots her vacated kitchen. Stacy says, "Tommy?" Stacy walks in the living room, sees the open door, and hurries over to it. Stacy reaches the door, then crosses its threshold. Exterior, the Wayne's new home's front yard, night. Stacy emerges through the front door and spots Thomas entering a wooded area across the street from her in an undeveloped lot. Stacy calls out, "Tommy, I'm sorry." Thomas disappears in the woods as Stacy turns to re-enter the house. Interior, the Wayne's new living room / kitchen, night. Stacy closes the front door, then shakes her hand in pain on her way back to the kitchen. Stacy says, "Great job, Stacy. Beat up and chase off the one guy who's always on your side." Stacy enters the kitchen and spots a still open freezer. Stacy slams the freezer door closed, which causes Thomas's cell phone to fall over on the countertop. Stacy picks up the phone, notices that a video is being recorded, then hits the stop recording button. Stacy walks over, then takes a seat at the kitchen table and takes a deep breath as she presses the replay button. Stacy begins to sob as she witnesses the video's results. Tommy says, "Baby, I love you and don't get mad, but I really need you to see yourself." The video plays as the scene fades to black. Exterior, wooded area, night. Thomas treks through the darkened woods at a fast pace. Thomas dodges a tree limb, but then trips over a hidden tree stump. Thomas tumbles to the ground and stops to catch his breath and tend to his now swollen eye. He says, "Oh shit, where the hell am I?" Thomas scans his horizon and sees a light in the distance. Thomas says, "Hallelujah." Thomas heads towards the light source. Thomas hops over a large fallen tree. Then, much to his surprise, he sinks up to his waist in a tar like goo. Interior, Nick's BMW day. Nick slams his palm on the steering wheel and roars in laughter. He yells out, "Quicksand, you gotta be shitting me." Thomas shakes his head in disbelief and says, "Welcome to Thomas Wayne's world." Exterior, woods, night. Thomas drags himself out of the quicksand, then heads towards the light source covered in muck. Thomas, in a voiceover to Nick, says, "So I dragged my still drunk ass out of that shit and walked for what seemed like forever. Then I found it." Nick, in a voiceover back, says, "Found what?" Thomas reaches the neighbor's backyard where the light source has originated. In a voiceover to Nick, says, "My salvation." Exterior, neighbor's backyard, night. Thomas exits the woods, attempts to quietly head to the front yard, but trips over a child's toy that sends him tumbling into a metal swing set. Thomas rubs his wound, scans to see if anyone is hurt, then trudges around the side of the neighbor's house. Thomas, in a voiceover to Nick, says, "I couldn't take another step, but then there it was." Nick returns a voiceover and says, "You didn't." Thomas spots a child's small bike and hobbles over to it. Thomas answers in a voiceover, "You bet your ass I did." Thomas hops on the tiny bike, then speeds away. In a voiceover, he says, "I rode that little sucker like the wind." Exterior, darkened streets in the P section, night. The song Ride Like the Wind plays. Thomas pedals the tiny bike down the seemingly endless streets. As Thomas labors along, in the corners of the screen, street signs randomly drift by that read Pine Tree Terrace, Pine Sap Street, Pine Bark Boulevard. Thomas approaches an intersection in the road. He looks up and it yells out, "Thank you, baby Jesus." Thomas gazes at the street sign and sees Pineland Lane. He yells out, "Finally, Pineland Lane." Thomas ditches the bike in a nearby bush, then makes his way down his new street. Thomas reaches the Altima just as Stacy bursts out the new home's front door. She yells out, "Baby!" Stacy reaches Thomas, but stops in her tracks as she goes to hug him. She asks, "Tommy, what happened? You're filthy." Stacy attempts to tend to Thomas's swollen eye as he then recoils from her approach. She says, "I'm so sorry. I got your message." She begins to cry. She adds, "Baby, I'm not mad. Just so ashamed." Thomas again shies away from Stacy. Stacy pulls Thomas's cell phone from her pocket and says, "I watched your video 10 times. Stacy tenderly pulls Thomas closer, inspects for a clean place on his face, then gently pecks him on the lips. Stacy adds, "I will never raise a fist to you again, and I swear, no more rumplements ever." Thomas reluctantly smiles as she adds, "Come on, let's go get you cleaned up." They turn to head into the house. Stacy says, "Baby, I found an anger management site online with a real doctor." Thomas gazes at Stacy lovingly and says, "Serious?" She says, "I think it really may help us all." Stacy assists Thomas up the new path, then into the new house. Interior, Nick's BMW day. Nick pulls the BMW into the parking spot in the rear of the employee parking area. Thomas slowly undoes his seat buckle. Nick asks, "Ready to go make this happen?" Thomas opens the door and attempts to exit. Thomas says, "I think I need a wheelchair. Stat!" Nick hops out of the car and he runs over to assist Thomas's exiting. Nick says, "Come on, Gramps, you're going to make it." The guys make their way to the front of the dealership. Exterior, front of the Nissan dealership, day. Nick and Thomas round the corner of the front of the dealership. Nick spots the sales team filtering into the front of the dealership. Nick says, "Hey, there's Barbarino and Logan." Thomas rubs his temples and says, "Gonna hit the head and splash some water. I feel like dog shit." Nick pats Thomas on the back as they separate. Nick continues on to meet up with Big Bob while Thomas sneaks into the dealership through the sales tower access door. Nick waves at Big Bob and Logan as they are chatting with a few other salespeople. Nick reaches the group, then says his hellos. "What's good, players?" Nick says. Logan says, "Not my prospects." Big Bob adds, "Got one of my repeat customers coming in, but nada after that." The group all shake their heads in regrettable agreement. The palpable tension is broken amongst the group upon hearing Janelle laughing as she approaches. Janelle and Remington walk together, then reach the group. Big Bob asks, "What's so funny, my little chickadee?" Janelle answers, "Ready for some shit, boys? Remy here, he lost his lunch at the pub last night, and guess in who swept in to save the day?" The group looks for their answer as Janelle points at Remington. He says, "Mr. McCoy." Big Bob looks at Remington with skepticism and says, "Mr. Who?" Remington answers, "He saved my butt." Janelle says, "Thank God I wore my panties this morning." She bends over and twerks her ass and adds, "Thought a monkey was going to fly out of my ass." The group all laugh at Janelle's gyrating as Remington says, "He brought me home and told my mama that I ate some bad shellfish." Big Bob adds, "Will wonders never cease?" Just then, Lyric walks up on the group and asks, "Anybody seen Tommy?" Nick points at the dealership and says, "He's in the crapper. He's not feeling himself." Lyric says, "I know. My girl Stacy just called and asked me to check on him." Janelle rolls her eyes and says, "Oh no, what did that sexy Amazon do?" Nick holds up his hands and shakes his head no. Nick says, "That one's on Tommy." Thomas emerges from the nearby sales tower access door and Nick spots him. Nick calls out, "Speak of the angel, there's Tommy." The group all watch as Thomas does his best to disguise his agony as he walks over to greet his cohorts. As Thomas gets closer to the girls gasp at the sight of Thomas. In his attempt to shake these cobwebs, Thomas has inadvertently washed off most of the camouflage that Stacy had placed on his eye. Lyric says, "Oh, hell no." Janelle caresses Thomas's arm and says, "This won't do it all." Janelle gently moves Thomas's hair to expose the damage. She says, "Dennis will ride you like a $20 whore if he sees this." Lyric gently tugs at Thomas's free arm and says, "Come on, sweetie. I've got a shade of foundation that'll cover this." Thomas agrees to let the girls help him. Thomas says, "Nobody wants to be Dennis Christian's sacrificial lamb." The girls begin to escort Thomas towards the dealership's front doors. Janelle says, "Come on, Humpty Dumpty." Lyric adds, "We'll put you back together again." The trio begin walking together as Gary's voice blares over the PA system. Gary's voice says, "Dennis Christian's Bentley has just hit the lot. T-minus 15 minutes. Everyone stops in place. Gary's voice continues, "Cross your T's and dot your I's, girls and boys. It's showtime." Everyone heads towards the dealership's entrance, with the unknown staring them all square in the face. Interior, Nissan's conference room, day. Lyric and Thomas are seemingly the last of the staff to enter the jam-packed conference room. Thomas's face looks the part, but needing Lyric's help to reach the stairs says different. Thomas winks at Lyric, then blows a quick kiss to Janelle as Lyric takes a seat in the front row next to her. Thomas slowly climbs the step to meet Big Bob, Nick, Logan, and Remington, who are all seated near the top row already. Thomas labors up the flight of stairs. As Thomas nears the crew, he takes each step very rigidly and carefully. Big Bob cries out to the sight of Thomas and says, "Oh, great. First all this bonus shit and now the fucking zombie apocalypse." Big Bob's much-needed zinger twerks the super tense room into a laughter-filled one. Seconds later, Larry Babson flies in through the conference room door as Thomas takes a seat. Larry says to the staff, "All right, settle down. This is going to be short and sweet." The entire room goes quiet as Dennis saunters his tiny frame through the doorway. Dennis heads over to the white eraser board at the front of the room. Dennis stares at the 500 written last night on the board. Dennis sinisterly chuckles. Dennis spins around to start his oration. Dennis says to the staff, "Let's cut right to the chase. When tomorrow rolls around and you haven't gotten paid on any bonuses," Dennis points over to Gary, who is sitting over with Kenny near the entranceway. Dennis continues, "You have one man to blame, your fearless leader on a suicide mission, Gary Kendallson." Gary seethes with anger as Kenny tries to calm him. Dennis continues, "I had no problems paying your regular bonus schedule, but no, Gary here had to go for the home run." Dennis stops in place, then a large smile overcomes his face. Dennis, in a lovingly tone, says, "I really just came here to thank you all. With the extra bread, I'm able to fly up north on a private plane instead of just first class." A groan rumbles around the room from the staff. Dennis angrily asks them, "What? Anybody got a problem with that?" Just then, and to his misfortune, Remington wakes from a bad dream, then shouts out, "Mommy! Mommy!" The staff erupt in laughter as Dennis then tears up the stairs to greet the interrupter. Dennis reaches a still floundering Remington as the tyrant goes nuclear. He screams, "And who in the hell are you?" Remington stands at attention and salutes. He says, "I'm your new salesman, sir. Remington Pearson, sir." Dennis glances down to Larry. Then Larry acknowledges Remy's statement with a nod of his head. Dennis adds, "All right, Tentpole, the last salesman who interrupted one of my meetings to try and make a fool of me, I ripped his head off and shit down his..." Just then, Murray has heard enough, defiantly stands and barks out, "Enough already." A flabbergasted Dennis stops his verbal attack on Remy, then stomps his way down the stairs to greet Murray. Murray says to Dennis, "Give the guy a break, man. He's just a kid, Dennis." Dennis confronts Murray to his face and says, "So, you're this guy's mother hen now? Fine with me, Mr. McDouchebag, but it's your ass on the line now." Dennis points up to Remington and says, "He sells a car today with zero help from anyone, and I'll be checking with Babson, then you still got a job." Dennis leans in and whispers to Murray. He says, "And kiss your new sales manager spot goodbye, Stu Knots." Dennis barks over to Larry and says, "Babson, let's roll." Dennis storms out of the room. Larry follows in tow, but before leaving turns and calls out, "Meeting's adjourned." Larry exits as the shell-shocked staff then begin to make their way to the door's exit. Murray stands motionless and bewildered as Janelle smacks him on the ass in passing. She says, "Good form, Poppy. Didn't think you had the cojones." The staff filters by Murray without incident until a befuddled Big Bob stops. Big Bob scans Murray like he's never seen the man before. Big Bob shakes his head while walking away, leaving Murray standing alone as the room's lights go dark. Interior, Stacy and Thomas's new bedroom, day. Stacy is just completing the finishing touches on her new bedroom's decor as she chats with Thomas over the phone. Stacy says, "Don't worry, babe, you guys will make it happen." Thomas over the speakerphone says, "We're dying here, babe. My head's pounding, and I think we had maybe 3 people in the first 3 hours." Stacy says, "Go ask Lyric for some Tylenol." Thomas again over the phone says, "Did already. She's got Pamprin, all in if I'm feeling bloated or irritable." Stacy says, "You're so stupid, babe. Thomas says, don't sweat it. I'll go find Big Bob for some. I love you, baby. Stacy reaches over to hang up the phone and answers, me too, Tommy. You've got this, babe. Stacy ends the call just as Amber and Andrew enter her bedroom. Andrew says, got everything set up in my room, Mom. Can I go check out the new neighborhood now? I saw a couple kids around. Stacy answers, sure, boo-boo. Just be careful in the woods across the street. I think Tommy found some quicksand in there. Andrew answers, quicksand? Awesome! Amber playfully smacks Andrew on the back of the head and says, hey, forgetful Fred, tell Mom about the letter. Andrew says, oh yeah, the mailman let me sign for some official-looking letter. Stacy asks, well, who was it from, cowboy? Andrew taps his lips with his finger, trying to remember, and says, I want to say Child Services. Stacy's eyes light up with hope. She says, boo-boo, it's very important. Please go find that letter, honey. Andrew answers, I'm on it, Sheriff. No problem. Andrew darts out the room as Stacy crosses her fingers. Exterior, Nissan service area, afternoon. Thomas rounds the corner of the dealership and sees Big Bob chatting with Logan near the service entrance doors. Thomas drags himself over to greet the duo. Thomas asks, please, tell me one of you got a Tylenol or ibuprofen. Big Bob chuckles, then reaches into his shirt pocket. He says, screw that ibuprofen bullshit. Big Bob pulls out a finger-sized marijuana blunt and says, got an IB Puffins right here. Just then, from inside the detail bay doors, detailers Isaac Peppers, mid-20s, Casper white complexion, and Joshua Salt, mid-20s, dark complexion, greet the trio. Big Bob asks, Salt Pepper, what's good? Salt answers, smelled that blunt from detail. Pepper asks, about to burn down the house? Bob answers, hey, do fat babies fart? Thomas runs his hands through his hair and says, shit, I haven't smoked since I met Stacy and the kids. Logan answers, no time like the present, Tommy. Thomas delicately touches his eye and says, fuck it, it couldn't hurt, right? Big Bob smiles broadly and says, now that's the spirit. Meet everyone in 10 behind the line of minivans. The guys share a group fist pump, then head off. Exterior, row of minivans / back of the dealership, afternoon. Big Bob takes a deep drag off of a now half-smoked blunt, passes it to Logan, then coughs out the remnants. Bob says, smooth, like 10 grit sandpaper. Just then, Salt appears from the side of a minivan. Salt says, sorry, Brodies. Dennis's kid showed up in his Lambo. Pepper's on the detail. Thomas passes the blunt to Salt as Big Bob pulls a second blunt out of his shirt pocket. He says to Salt, you guys go knock that one out. Big Bob inspects blunt number 2 as Salt smiles and thanks. Big Bob says, got what's behind curtain number 2 right here. Big Bob ignites the blunt as Salt splits the scene. Logan says, holy shit, another one? I'm already fucking wood. Thomas accepts the blunt's pass from Big Bob, takes the drag, then looks at Logan oddly and says, wood, wait, what? Logan takes the pass from Thomas, inhales, then laughs, remembering. He says, holy shit, I haven't thought about wood since Southampton College. Bob answers, that's funny, man, I like that. Logan says, we'd rate how high you get off a particular weed on the Janka hardness of wood scale. Thomas answers, I get it. Hey, if it was a lame smoke, a yellow pine or Douglas fir, Logan answers. Big Bob grabs the blunt and says, and my fine smoke here? Logan answers, definitely a maple or mesquite. Thomas attempts to stretch his legs, but he nearly doubles over in pain. He says, oh, damn. Logan stabilizes Thomas's and then attempts to help him walk it off. Damn, Brody, hang in there, Logan says. Thomas answers, think I'm petrified wood. An alarmed Bob notices big Larry Babson coming their way and says, chill, guys, here comes Babson. The trio stand in silence until the threat passes, as Larry then walks in a different direction. Big Bob says, cool, he's gone. Logan winks at Thomas while slapping Big Bob on the back. He says, I'm going to hit it. Hey, thanks, Mahogany Man. Big Bob scans Thomas's appearance and asks, You gonna be okay, Tommy? Thomas jokingly uses a pseudo cane to walk and says, "Don't worry, old Grandpa here will make it." Logan and Big Bob split the scene, leaving Thomas to slowly drag his ass forward. Exterior, Nissan's employee parking lot, afternoon. An extremely disoriented Thomas wanders the back lot slowly. As Thomas passes Nick's BMW, he notices the doors were left unlocked earlier. The low battery alarm on Thomas's phone announces. The phone says, "Your battery is critically low. Please recharge." As luck would have it, Thomas peers into the BMW and sees his phone charger cord connected to the BMW's dashboard. Thomas says, "Cool." Thomas opens the passenger door, slides gently into the seat, then connects his ailing phone to its charger cord. Thomas taps the now brightened phone screen's alarm app. Thomas says, "Quick cat nap. I'm useless like this." Thomas sets the alarm for 30 minutes ahead and says, "Get up a new man and good to go." Thomas nestles into the stiff seat, cautiously squirming back and forth, looking for the right angle. Thomas finally finds the perfect spot facing the passenger window. Sadly, one last adjustment of Thomas's foot just before passing out knocks his phone to the driver's side floor. The phone bounces, disconnecting the power cord from its mate. An unseen church organ plays a few ominous chords. Dum, dum, dum. Interior, Nissan's management bathroom, early evening. Gary barges through the door of the posh executive bathroom, storms over to the lone sink, then checks his reflection in the mirror. Gary says, "Holy shit, what am I gonna do?" Gary calmly walks over to, then opens the bathroom's lone toilet stall. Gary enters the stall, sits on the closed toilet lid, faces towards the back wall, then lifts the corner of the tank's lid. Gary says, "Go down with a blaze of glory, that's what." Gary pulls out a bottle of Jack Daniels from the tank, places it on the floor while simultaneously downing a few pills with his free hand. Gary unscrews the cap, then takes a large gulp of the Jack. Gary says, "Well, we had a good run." Just then, Gary hears someone entering the bathroom. Gary stands, then peeks over the top of the stall's wall. Gary's eyes nearly bug out of his head as he spots Murray. Gary yells, "You!" Murray answers, "Gary, I was just looking for you." And enraged, Gary flies out of the stall, then bull rushes Murray and says, "Well, you fucking found me." Murray says, "Wait." Gary grabs Murray by the neck, tosses him through the stall door, causing Murray to crash to the tiled bathroom floor. Murray yells out, "I can explain." Gary says, "Explain what?" Gary leaps on the top of the still down Murray, grabs him by the lapels, then shakes him violently and says, "How you sold me fucking out? You call me your brother, motherfucker." Murray begins to sob vociferously and says, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, man." Both being older guys quickly run out of gas and basically lay atop of each other as Gary says, "Why, man? Why?" Murray wipes his nose with his sleeve and answers, "It's MJ, Gary. His episodes have gotten so much worse." Murray whimpers and says, "Marta said she'd take him from me and leave me if I couldn't get the cash for MJ's new school." Gary rises from the floor, then assists Murray up and asks, "Why didn't you come to me?" Murray answers, "She said, what kind of man has to grovel to his family? Not one that she'd stay with, that's what." Gary reaches over and grabs a bottle of Jack, downs a shot, then hands it to Murray. Gary answers, I couldn't help you even if I wanted. Looks like I'll be in line for a new job tomorrow." Murray downs his own jug of liquor and answers, "That's what I came in here for." Murray hands back the bottle and says, "I think I found a way to screw Dennis and maybe save the day, bro." Gary smacks Murray on the back and says, "What you got, man? I'm fucking desperate." Murray encourages Gary to follow him and says, Let's hit Dennis's office and pray we get a little lucky. They head for the exit. Interior, Dennis's office, early evening. Murray sits behind Dennis's desk, tapping away on a keyboard as Gary nervously paces behind him. Murray says, "Should be just a minute, then I'll know if it still works." Gary answers, "It's our asses hitting the fan if it doesn't." Murray taps on the desk while the computer icon spins. Murray says, "Now technically, these deals are for tomorrow, but Nissan's new month starts at 5 o'clock tonight." Murray pulls up a separate tab on the computer screen and says, "Got the VIN numbers right here. Just need my passcode to work to release the customer info." Gary asks, "How many we got?" Murray scrolls the screen down to the bottom of the page, then turns to Gary and smiles. He says, 73. Gary rubs Murray's back in anticipation of good news and says, "Drag 80 to 90% in, give these suckers away, and we may just make it." Murray hits one last keystroke on the keyboard and says, "Here we go." The computer screen blinks red and reads, "Access denied. Check with your administrative executive for further assistance." Gary slams his fist on the desk and screams, "We're screwed!" Murray says, "Wait, there's got to be an answer." The guys turn to each other and say in unison, "Babson!" Gary claps his hands together in excitement and says, "I know Larry's kryptonite. Young chicks. Hey, call old Chappie over in service and tell him to get his team ready for 50 plus deliveries." Gary heads towards the exit of Dennis's office and says, "I gotta go get Janelle and Lyric ready for prime time." Just before exiting, Gary turns to Murray, who is typing away. Gary says, "Hey." Murray looks up from the screen at Gary as Gary says, "Great job, brother." Murray, with redemption in his eyes, nods at Gary. Gary bolts out of the room as Murray begins to dial. Interior, hallway outside Larry Babson's office, early evening. Larry confidently walks down the hall to his office. That is, until he nears his office door and notices that it's ajar. Larry cautiously nears the cracked open door, then hears giggling sounds coming from inside of his office. Larry slowly eases the door open and begins to drool as he spots Janelle and Lyric. They are seated behind his desk, stroking each other's hair. Janelle says, "You are so beautiful, baby." Larry eases himself inside of the office. Interior, Larry's office, early evening. Larry begins to touch his groin as Janelle pulls on Lyric's hair. Larry interrupts the girls, and as he tries to be sexy, he says, "Hey, what's going on in here?" The girls feign getting caught in the act as Lyric scrambles to find her blouse. Janelle walks slowly towards Larry and says, seductively, "What do you want to be going on in here?" Janelle grabs Larry by the chin as Lyric slowly walks over. Lyric says, "What about Bonnie, Larry?" Janelle asks, "Yeah, you think she'd mind?" Lyric finishes, "If we borrowed you?" Larry reaches over and flips down the framed picture of his and Bonnie's wedding photo that's sitting on his desk. Larry says, "To hell with that frigid bitch. This is a dream come true." The girls first giggle and smile at each other, then immediately stop what they are doing and begin to redress. Janelle says, "You think we got enough?" Lyric answers, "Oh, plenty." Each of the ladies walk to a different part of Larry's office, pick up their phones, then press stop on the phone's camera app. Janelle walks over, then shoves Larry into his desk chair. Janelle says, "You fucked up, buddy boy." Lyric answers, "Bonnie's gonna cut your little junk off when we send her these vids, Mr. Babson." Larry throws his hands up in surrender and says, "Okay, whatever you want." Janelle laughs, picks up Larry's office phone receiver, then dials a number. She says into the phone, "Gary, mission accomplished." Janelle listens to the phone, then turns to Gary and asks, "What's your Nissan access code, Casanova?" A still startled Larry thinks for a second, then remembers and says, Bonnie, blue, like the color, Butler. Janelle into the phone asks, you get that? Good. The ladies begin to walk out of Larry's office as Lyric says, nice doing business with you. Janelle turns to Larry and puts her finger up to her lips and says, shh. And remember, Larry, loose lips sink relationships. Janelle exits and closes the door behind her as Larry slumps back into his chair and calls out, $1,000 for just a copy of that video. Larry fans himself, trying to cool while resetting the frame wedding photo back in its place. Interior, Nick's BMW, early evening. Thomas is curled into a fetal position in the front passenger seat. Thomas's coma-like state persists as Gary's voice blares in the distance over the PA speakers. Gary over the PA says, everyone, and I do mean everyone, meet me at the detail bays in 5 minutes. Sharp! Thomas belches, begins to drool as the lights on his chances appear to fade to black. Exterior, Nissan detail bays, night. As the sun begins to set on the horizon, the entire sales, service, finance, detail, reception teams amass in front of the large bay doors. And excitement builds amongst the team as word of the Batson incident and Gary's impending news percolates through the ranks. Big Bob approaches Nick and Logan as they stand in the middle of the team. Big Bob asks, you seeing Tommy? Nick says, Stacy called you too, huh? Big Bob nods while rubbing his reddened eyes and says, thinks I screwed up. How is that? Nick asks. Me and Logan blazed Tommy out, he says. Logan adds, probably curled up in one of the minivans. Kenny begins to bring some order to the team as Nick asks, after Gary's meeting, please help me find him. Big Bob and Logan agree as Kenny calls out to the team. Everybody here? The team comes to a silence as Kenny nods to inside the detail department. Gary walks out from inside the detail bays, then hops upon a large wooden soapbox crate. Gary calls out, thanks everyone for coming. Gary takes a deep breath and says, the way I see it, girls and boys, the universe boils down into 2 constants. Gary holds up his pointer finger and says, math, because it's an exact science. Gary's middle finger joins his pointer finger as he continues. And family, because sometimes that's all you got. The team all nod in agreement as Gary continues. The numbers are easy to read. We're at 450, exactly 50 short of 500 with less than 4 hours to go. Basic math, right? Gary grabs at his chest, then lovingly states, now how we get there, that starts with my immediate family. Gary scans the team, then calls into the detail area. Come on, Murray. Murray emerges from the darkness of the detail bay, walks over, then hands Gary a stack of papers. Gary says, my prodigal brother, he finally came home. Gary holds up the papers and waves them at the team. Gary says, and he bought a chance at the promised land along with him. Gary waves his sales teamer forward to greet him. Gary continues, I've got 73 off-lease leads waiting to roll thanks to Murray's quick thinking. Gary points at Janelle and Lyric, who are standing together in front of the pack. And definitely to Nellie and Lyric for coming through in the clutch, Gary says. Gary hands out the leads to a stream of salespeople, then calls to the rest of the crew. Gary says, and for everyone who's not directly on my team, Chappie and his boys, plus my 2 studs in detail. The crew eagerly await their roles to be exposed as Gary continues. We are one big family here. Damn, we spend more time with each other than with our actual families. Gary reaches into his pocket, then pulls out a large wad of cash. Gary says, but talk is cheap. Gary waves the cash around for all to see. Our numbers are your numbers. 50 cars times $50 equals $2,500 in cash for each and every one of you. The crew howls in anticipation. Salt says, for $2,500, Pepper adds, who do you need us to kill? Gary laughs as he stuffs the money back into his pocket. Gary says, just kill it at your jobs, everyone. I know we got this. Murray jumps up onto the soapbox with Gary, puts his arm around Gary, then calls out to the team, can I get a 500 on 3? Big Bob joins in and says, 1, 2, 3. The team all say 500. The team start to disperse in their own direction as Gary waves Lyric and Remington over to him. Lyric and Remy join Gary, then they bring it in close. Gary says, Steel, need you to be just that right now, like steel. Lyric is your boss right now. Lyric says, I've already called most of these customers and set up a schedule for them to get here. Gary adds, just follow her lead, and I need you to meet and greet, then turn them over to the L-bomb here. Remington looks at Gary with distress. Gary says, don't worry, I'll get you your deal. Just play your role right now. Lyric says to Remy, come on, handsome. Got the first customers on a quest arriving in 10 minutes. Lyric and Remy speed off as Gary turns to Kenny and says, let's go make this happen. Exterior, front of the Nissan dealership, night. Remington greets a van load of customers exiting their older model Nissan Quest minivan. Remington walks the customers to the front doors of the dealership, right into the waiting arms of Lyric as 2 more cars pull onto the customer parking area. Remy darts off to greet the new arrivals. Interior, Nissan showroom floor, night. Big Bob opens the hood of a demonstration model Maxima that is parked in the middle of the showroom floor. He points out a few features to an engine of an interested female customer. Interior, Nissan Altima, moving, night. Janelle, buckled up in the back seat of an Altima, is in mid-conversation with the female driver and male front seat passenger. Janelle asks, what do you think? The couple glance at each other and then saying in harmony, perfect. Interior, Nissan showroom / negotiation table, night. Logan slides a proposal offer sheet across the negotiation table to an eagerly waiting couple. Customer number 1, male, early 30s, checks the figures written on the proposal, nods, then looks over at customer number 2, male, mid-30s. Customer number 2 smiles, reaches across the table, then shakes hands with Logan. Interior, sales tower, night. Nick, Janelle, and a few other salespeople wait in the tower's bullpen for Gary to sign their proposal offer sheets. Gary hands Nick his sheet as Kenny erases the number 40 from the portable dry eraser board. Kenny writes 461, 39 to 500. Gary calls out, next! Interior, Carrie and Carla's finance office, night. On opposite sides of the large finance office, Carrie and Carla are each seated behind their respective desks. They each have a customer seated across the desk from them, and nearly simultaneously, they all rise from their seats and shake hands. Big Bob and Nick walk into the office as Carla's customer and Carrie's customer meet in the middle of the room and high-five each other. Exterior, Nissan service area, night. A new Nissan 400Z with its MSRP sticker pasted on its windows drives up the service lane. The sports car then pulls to a halt in front of the service bay door. Murray hops out of the driver's side, then quickly makes his way over to the service area's front doors. Murray tosses the 400Z's keys over to an awaiting service tech, then continues his trek back to the front of the dealership. Interior, sales tower, night. Larry walks in through the showroom door, makes his way through the busy bullpen, then hops behind Gary's desk. Gary asks, what's up, Babson? Larry says, figured if I can't beat him, join him. Hey, what can I do to help your team, Gary? Gary smiles at Larry and says, hey, tell you the truth, my boys in detail are swamped. Larry rolls up his shirt sleeves and says, hey, I'm on it, man. Gary flies out the tower through the access door just as Kenny writes on the eraser board 480, 20 to 500. Exterior, Nissan's detail bays, night. A new Nissan Sentra drives up to the bay doors, comes to a halt, then Larry exits the driver's side door. Larry calls into the detail area where Salt and Pepper are both in mid-detailing of a quest. Larry says, hey, I filled this one up, guys. Where do you want the keys? Salt says, hey, just leave them in the door. Larry looks over, spots Remington using a razor blade to remove an MSRP sticker from a new Nissan Maxima's window, then walks over to Remington. Larry says, hey, kid, what are you doing? Remington says, hey, Gary asked me to... Larry takes the razor blade from Remy's hand and says, listen, there's a feeding frenzy going on and Gary's in need of a car shark. You ready? Remy nods yes as Larry slaps him on the back and says, well, go get your deal, Steele. Remy vaults towards the front of the dealership. Interior, sales tower, night. A nearly empty room finds Lyric, Gary, and Kenny in mid-sentence. Lyric says, I need someone available now, boss. Gary runs his hands through his hair just as Remington enters the tower through the access door. Gary calls out to Remy, hey, Steele, you ready for the big leagues? A new man named Steele stands tall and says, give me the ball, coach. I won't let you down. Gary nods with confidence, then hands Steele a set of keys. Gary says, bring us home, kid. A confident Steele strides out of the tower as Gary checks his watch and Kenny writes on the eraser board 491, 9 to 500. Exterior, Nissan's detail bays, night. A new Nissan Sentra drives up to the bay doors, comes to a halt, then Larry exits the driver's side door. Larry calls into the detail area where Salt and Pepper are both in mid-detailing of a quest. Larry says, I filled this one up, guys. Where do you want the keys? Salt answers, just leave them in the door. Larry looks over, spots Remington using a razor blade to remove an MSRP sticker from a new Maxima's window, then walks over to Remington. Larry says to Remy, hey kid, what you doing? Remy answers, Gary, he asked me to... Larry takes the razor blade from Remy's hand and says, listen, there's a feeding frenzy going on and Gary's in need of a car shark. You ready? Remy nods yes, and then Larry slaps him on the back and says, well, go get your deal, Steele. Remy vaults towards the front of the dealership. Interior, sales tower, night. A nearly empty room finds Lyric, Gary, and Kenny in mid-sentence. Lyric says, I need someone available. Now, boss. Gary runs his hands through his hair just as Remington enters the tower through the access door. Gary calls out to Remy, hey, Steele, you ready for the big leagues? A new man named Steele stands tall. He says, give me the ball, coach. I won't let you down. Gary nods with confidence, then hands Steele a set of keys. Gary says, bring us home, kid. A confident Steele strides out of the tower as Gary checks his watch and Kenny writes on the eraser board 491, 9 to 500. Interior, Dwayne's new kitchen, night. Shelly and Stacy are seated at the table of the now fully furnished kitchen. Stacy says, where is that man of mine? Stacy hangs up her cell phone as Shelly says, still no luck, huh? Stacy stands, walks to the countertop, then balances her phone up against a toaster. She says to Shelly, just gonna leave Tommy a video message with the great news. Shelly responds, good call. Stacy begins her video as Shelly takes a sip of her tea. Interior, sales tower, night. The tower is completely darkened. The darkness is broken as the showroom door slowly opens, exposing the brightness of the showroom floor. Lyric escorts Steele into the tower, then quickly shuts the door. From the darkness, Steele calls out, "What the heck?" The tower's overhead lights are activated, flooding the room with light and exposing that the entire team is sardined into the brimming tower. From behind his desk, Gary calls over to Kenny, who is at the eraser board with pen in hand. Gary yells out, "Where does Steele's signed deal put us?" Kenny looks at the pen, then throws it in the air and yells, "Can you say 500? The room erupts in revelry as high fives and hugs abound. Gary then interrupts the celebration and says, "Wait a minute." Gary reaches onto his desk, then holds up a pair of scissors and says, "Let's make it official." The crew shuffles Steele through the crowd and over to Gary. Gary reaches over the desk, grabs Steele's tie, then cuts it with the scissors near the knot. Gary walks the tie over to a nearby corkboard, picks up a stapler, then staples the tie amongst a grouping of severed ties. Gary turns and exclaims, "He's a mother-humping car shark!" The crew all congratulate Steele's accomplishment. Steele yells out, "Let's take a car shark selfie for Dennis to choke on." Gary extends his phone out to get everyone into frame in front of the 500 whiteboard. Gary yells, "Ready? 1, 2, 3. Everyone yells, 500. The phone's camera clicks, freezing that joyous moment in time, then fades to black. Interior, private airplane, night. The scene fades in from black as Gary's 500 selfie appears on a phone screen. The scene widens as Dennis, seated alone on a private plane, has just received Gary's text on the same phone. With his free hand, Dennis throws a salted peanut into his mouth, then begins to choke. A flight attendant rushes out from behind a curtain, then darts over to Dennis. The flight attendant pounds on Dennis's back, finally dislodging the obstruction. Dennis violently pants, trying to catch his breath. Exterior, Nissan's employee parking lot, night. Nick is chatting on his phone as he makes his way from the front to the back of the employee parking lot. Nick into the phone says, "Babe, my phone's about to die. Got my charger in the Beamer. I'll call you before we split." Nick's phone dies as he completes the trip to the BMW. Nick notices the BMW's windows are fogged up and says, "Oh shit, don't tell me." Nick opens the driver's side door and spots Thomas sprawled out on the passenger seat. Nick yells out, "Tommy!" Thomas violently awakes and says, "Holy shit, what the hell?" Nick says, "Hey, Rip Van Winkle, we've been looking for your ass everywhere." Thomas rubs his swollen eye and says, "Well, here I am, sunshine. What's up?" Nick reaches into the BMW to grab his power cord, finds Thomas's phone, then hands it to him. Nick says, "Stacy's freaking. You need to call. Fuck, Tommy, you missed everything." Thomas checks his phone for power. Thomas says, "What do you mean, missed everything?" Nick answers, "Holy shit. Murray came through. We hit 500. That's all." Nick checks his watch and says, "Bro, get your ass up to the tower. You still may have time to sneak out that last deal." Thomas yells, "Thanks, man." Thomas eases out of the BMW, then does his best Quasimodo impersonation, running to the tower in hopes of ringing that elusive bell. Interior, sales tower, night. Gary eases back into his chair behind his desk as Murray pleads his case. Murray says, "Come on, brother, just let Steele Girder here take over." Murray puts his arm around Steele and says, "It's the 500 kid." Steele playfully jabs Murray in the ribs, then turns to Gary. Steele says, "Piece of cake. He's basically got the deal wrapped up." Gary looks at them skeptically, then calls over his shoulder and says, "Kenny, where we at?" Kenny was just writing 507 on the eraser board and says, 507. Murray says, "It's a done deal. They just got to choose between the Quest and a Pathfinder." Steele answers, "They test drove the van already. Now just a quick lap around the mall in the Pathfinder." Murray holds up his pointer finger and says, "Just one thing queer in the deal, little Jeffrey." Murray slaps his own forehead and says, "Holy hell, I hate to say it about a 6-year-old, but what a pain in the ass. He wouldn't stop about going to Toys R Us." Kenny leans part way over the desk and says, "Is that what I heard outside, like about 10 minutes ago?" Murray answers, "That's nothing. You should have been in the quest with us." Murray starts to chuckle and says, "When Mom told little Jeffrey that we had to go back to the dealership?" Murray rolls his eyes, then covers his eyes. Murray says, "Oh my." Just then, Thomas staggers into the tower. The guys all slowly turn their heads and spot the panting mess that stands before them. Gary says, "What in the hell happened to you?" Thomas catches his breath and says, "Hey, I promised to fill you in later about local idiot falls asleep in BMW and misses the sale of the century." Thomas implores, "But for now, please tell me you got a dingleberry still clinging on the vine." Gary looks at Steele for a response to Thomas's question. Gary says, "Well, does he?" Remy dramatically waves his hand and says, "For Tommy boy, the world." A relieved Thomas thanks Remy. Thomas says, "I'll rip that dingle out with my teeth if need be." Gary nods his acceptance as Murray and Thomas then head towards the access door. Thomas turns back to Gary and Remy. Thomas says, "Thanks, boss man. And Remy, would you charge my phone for me?" Thomas hands Remy his phone as Remy shakes his head yes. Thomas says, "Cord's on my desk in the phone room." "Hey, thanks, kid." Thomas catches back up with Murray, then they exit the tower. Exterior, front of the Nissan dealership, night. The access door opens as Murray and Thomas then exit the tower onto the lot. Murray spots his customers in the customer parking area, and the guys start walking towards the customers as Murray says, "So, 2 good news or 1 bad news first, Tommy?" Thomas says, "Oh, please, God, man. I need some good news, Murray." They continue their trek as the 2 customers wave over to Murray. Murray says, "Okay, it's Linda and Jeff Sullivan. They're ready to roll, bro. They like the quest, but they're coming out of a Pathfinder lease." Thomas smiles as Murray continues, "Just test drive the new Pathfinder. They've got the same monthly payment, so you're golden." The guys near the Sullivans, who are readying for their test drive. Linda Sullivan, early 30s, reaches into the van through the open side door of the Quest. She delicately removes a child's safety seat from the van. As Linda turns to transfer the seat into the Pathfinder, we meet little Jeffrey, 6 years old, who is buckled in and soundly sleeping. Murray says, "Good news number 2. I think Linda slipped little Jeffrey a Benadryl slushie during the test drive. The little guy finally fell asleep." Murray calls over to Jeff and says, "Hey, buddy." Thomas tugs on Murray's sleeve and whispers, "What's the bad news?" Murray whispers back to Thomas, "Whatever you do, if the little guy wakes up, do not respond to anything about the creature from the Black Lagoon." Thomas looks and says, "The creature from what?" Murray says, "Just trust me." Murray and Thomas reach the couple as Murray starts with the introductions. Murray says, "Linda and Jeff, this is my brother, Thomas. He's going to step in and bring this home, okay?" Linda says, "Of course. Go take care of MJ." Jeff adds, "You're still getting credit, right?" Thomas shakes Jeff's hand while noticing that little Jeffrey is wearing a Thoreau Elementary t-shirt. Thomas says, "No problem, Jeff. We're one big family here at Daytona Nissan." Murray adds, "That's what you're going to love, folks, that real-time family touch." Thomas adds, "And I see little Jeffrey is an honor roll student at Thoreau. My little guy Andrew goes there too." Jeff adds, "Excellent, we're neighbors." Murray hands Jeff the Pathfinder keys, then waves his goodbye. Linda finishes strapping in her son's car seat. Interior, new Nissan Pathfinder, moving night. Thomas sits quietly in the back seat of the Pathfinder across from the slumbering little Jeffrey, while Jeff, who is driving, chats with Linda. Linda says, "What do you think, honey?" Jeff smiles as he grips the steering wheel. Jeff says, "Handles even better than the old Pathfinder. I'm ready for four-wheeling down in the bogs of the Black Lagoon." Linda quickly turns to see if little Jeffrey is still sleeping. Linda says, "Please, Jeff, no more chokes, okay?" Jeff chuckles, then taps Linda on the leg. Jeff says, "I'm sorry, Lynn. That poor little guy." Linda grabs a clear plastic case from her purse, then hands it back to Thomas. Linda says, "I have all of Jeff and my information right here for you, Thomas." Thomas smiles as he receives the information from Linda. Thomas looks through the clear case and notices the address on their licenses. Thomas says, "Hey, we really are neighbors. You're on Pine Sap Circle, and we just moved into a place over on Pineland Lane." Jeff says, "Excellent. If you like getting dirty, I got a couple of ATVs. Hey, there's still a lot of undeveloped areas in the P section to do some serious bogging. Just got to watch out for the quicksand." Thomas chuckles at himself and says, "Yeah, I've heard." Jeff pulls the new Pathfinder into a parking spot in the customer parking area. Jeff puts his Pathfinder in park, then turns to Linda. Jeff asks, "What do you think, babe?" Linda thinks for a second, then nods her head. She says, "Definitely the Pathfinder. You boys jump inside and start getting things ready. I'll bring little Jeffrey in a minute to meet you." Thomas says, "Well, let's go make it happen." The adults all exit the Pathfinder. Exterior customer parking area at night. Linda tends to little Jeffrey's car seat as Thomas and Jeff make their way towards the dealership's front doors. Jeff says, "And by the way, Thomas, thanks for helping us out, man. You guys really make us feel like family." Thomas says, "Thanks for noticing, buddy. And you mind if I ask you something?" Jeff says, "Sure, shoot." Thomas says, "Hey, what's up with the creature from the Black Lagoon? I haven't seen that old black and white in years." Jeff chuckles and responds, "It's really nothing. The dirt in those bogs I mentioned, it's so wet and dark brown, I came home just covered in it the other day." Thomas remembers his own misfortune as Jeff continues. "Little Jeffrey saw me all filthy. So, like an idiot, I told him that I was riding ATVs with the creature from the Black Lagoon. Now he's convinced the creature lives behind our house." Thomas holds the front door open for Jeff to enter. Thomas says, "Kids are funny like that. I'm sure it's nothing." Thomas follows Jeff into the dealership. Interior sales tower at night. The entire sales team watched from the bullpen as Thomas grabs the Sullivan's proposal sheet from Gary, who is seated behind the desk. The sales team randomly cheer. "You got this, man. Come on, Tommy boy. Bring it home, man." Thomas takes a deep breath and heads through the door. Thomas turns back to the team and says, "Hey, it's a done deal, right? What could possibly go wrong?" Interior, Nissan showroom's floor, night. Thomas enters the showroom floor from the tower. Thomas is instantly alarmed when he sees Jeff opening the driver's side door of the experimental Nissan 400ZX coupe that sits upon the showroom floor. The 400ZX's alarm system activates as the sports car's lights begin to flash, and a deafening blaring of the alarm fills the showroom. A series of slow-motion scenes follow. Jeff stumbles backwards. Linda is seated but so shocked by the alarm that she jumps to her feet, inadvertently dropping little Jeffrey to the showroom floor. Thomas runs over to help little Jeffrey, scoops him up, and their eyes meet. Little Jeffrey screams in fear. The slow motion sequence ends as little Jeffrey says, "Mommy, it's the creature from the Black Lagoon." Little Jeffrey leaps out of Thomas's arms, then he runs to Linda. "He stole my bike last night." Exterior, the Sullivan's backyard, night. A replay of last night's events play, but this time, little Jeffrey's eyes are highlighted watching through his bedroom windows blinds. Little Jeffrey watches Thomas hop on, then ride off with his bike as the blinds dramatically shut. Interior, Nissan showroom floor, night. Thomas watches in amazement as the sirens still blare and little Jeffrey runs up to the showroom's front doors, with Linda following not far behind. Little Jeffrey screams, "Ah!" The sirens finally stop blaring as Jeff runs over to Thomas. Jeff grabs the clear plastic bag housing their personal information from the table, then nervously looks at Thomas. He says, "We'll be back tomorrow, Thomas. I just gotta go, buddy. Sorry." Jeff turns and darts towards the front doors as Thomas runs his hands through his hair. Thomas says to himself, "But tomorrow's too late." Thomas looks directly into the camera and speaks to the audience. "Oh shit, I am the creature from the Black Lagoon." The showroom's lights instantly shut off, leaving Thomas to be bathed alone in the darkness. Exterior, front of the Nissan dealership, night. A completely disheartened Thomas drags himself out of the showroom and walks for a moment while looking at the ground. Thomas begins to lightly sob at his misfortune. Just then, Steele darts out of the same doors, then approaches Thomas. Steele asks, "You okay, Tommy?" Thomas wipes his eyes clear and says, "Yeah, I just pulled a nose hair, man, that's all." Steele says, "Tough break, man. Hey, what'd you say? Luckily up, huh?" Thomas begrudgingly nods in agreement and says, "Nail on the head, kid." Remy reaches into his back pocket and says, "Before I forget, here's your phone." Just then, Lyric pops her head out of the showroom doors. She calls over to the guys. "Tough break, Tommy. Hey, Steele, you driving me to the racetrack or what?" Thomas smiles at Remy. He says, "I think you got a date with a winner there, partner." Remy smiles broadly, then turns to head back inside. Steele says, "Tommy, thanks for everything." Thomas pats Remy on the back and says, "Go get him, Tiger." Just as Remy splits, Nick's BMW pulls into the open spot in the customer parking area. The BMW's horn beeps. Thomas waves his acknowledgement over to Nick, then Thomas pushes his phone's power button. Thomas slowly continues his progress to the BMW as his phone turns on, then announces, "You have one video voice message." Thomas scans the phone screen, sees Stacy's picture next to the alert, then rolls his eyes. He says to himself, "Guess it's time to face the music." Thomas hits the play button on the screen. Stacy's appears in a video on the phone screen. It's the message that she had recorded in their kitchen hours earlier. Stacy says, "Hi, baby. Where are you, Sleeping Beauty?" Stacy reaches over to the kitchen countertop, then picks up a check off of its surface. Stacy says, "You won't believe it. Miguel Zarira just finally came through." Stacy holds up the check close to the phone's camera and says, "I checked with the bank. The whole $15,000 is good." Stacy blows a kiss at the screen and says, "I finally came through for us, babe." Stacy takes a moment to compose herself as a tear comes to her eye. She says, "Babe, I know I might not say it often enough, but I want to thank you for everything you do for us. Me and the kids love you being mom, dad." Stacy picks up her phone, kisses the screen, then waves goodbye. Stacy says, "See you tonight, handsome guy." The video ends as Thomas shakes his head in disbelief. As Thomas finishes the last few feet to Nick's BMW, video clips of the last 2 days appear in the corner of the screen. Stacy kissing Thomas in the kitchen. Thomas falling into the quicksand. Thomas and the sales team laughing together in the tower. Nick and Thomas at the pier. Interior, Nick's BMW, night. Nick revs the BMW's engine as Thomas opens the passenger door, takes his seat, then buckles up. Nick asks, "All good?" Thomas says, "Hey, it's a first, bro. You know that light at the end of my tunnel I'm always talking about?" Nick says, "Yeah." Thomas says, "Well, it's finally not a train coming the other way." Nick laughs, then slaps Thomas on the back and says, "That's friggin' dynamite, Tommy boy. Let's roll." Exterior, Nick's BMW, night. The BMW backs out of the parking spot. The BMW's wheels spin, then it speeds away from the dealership and into the night. Fade out,
The end.